All right. I think we're live. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone in chat can hear me, just push 1. All right. I got a confirmation on the chat. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 472. Economics. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. Doc in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with. There'll be a link in the chat for you to click upon if you want to engage in the discussion. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Just as an FYI, we do not give out financial advice on this channel. If you want financial advice, please go to cfp.net. Look up one in your area. All right. Let me find the link.
Feeding them that same old bullshit, man. Regurgitated crap. It's the meaning behind the sacred symbols, the goal behind the patience that makes it simple. For me to be the creator, I had to stay consistent. Knew that it would be greater later and stay persistent. When your moves about millions, you gotta run a maze. So get the hint, no disturbances when I'm running plays. Needs and wants the strongest traits of the human nature. Disconnections from it all, some say it's elevation. But fuck that, we getting rich for my peoples who was crucified, tortured, and lynched. I'm a product of kings and queens and gods and earths and slaves anonymous. Freedom or death is what we used to shout. So while we still throwing parties inside a burning house, the devil's still trying to turn us out. History repeats what you refuse to learn about. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere. I probably move to Ghana, get into politics to restore the motherland and legalize marijuana. 1 for the ancestors, 2 for the rituals, the reincarnated energy from the spiritual crossroads that seems near me. My thoughts travel like string theory, which allows me to do my thing yearly. Unorthodox artist when I started was hella critics. I went from pimping and macking to using metaphysics. I'm on some Dr. Delbert Blair shit, dropping heavy. Science, word up, I even blew trees with Dr. Sebi. And that was around the same time I was copping heavy. Couple homies fell victim that was not respected. I'm still a factor in my section, studying lessons from the essence. The wisdom is the most precious. Sajad Allahu to the ones who know the hidden face that came from the west with new wine and golden scrolls. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere.
All right. Let's get started. Shout out to everyone in the chat room. Mufasa, Shabash, shalom to you. Rain and Woman, good evening. Jay Green, what up? EP, what up? Black Scorpion, what up? Maligar, what up? Yeah, make sure y'all subscribe to Rain and Woman. Rain and Woman does offer life coaching. If you need some assistance in your life and life coaching, Rain and Woman has you covered in that area. Make sure you get in touch with her, subscribe to her channel. Megan Martana, what's going on? All right. All right, first item on the docket is from CNBC.com. Amazon is opening its first full-size cashierless grocery store. Here's a first look inside. Amazon is cracking further into the $800 billion U.S. grocery industry, keeping the likes of Walmart, Kroger, 7-Eleven, and Instacart on their toes. The online behemoth on Tuesday is opening its first full-size cashierless grocery store, 5 years in the making. The Amazon Go Grocery is in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle, in the Amazon corporate headquarters backyard. Amazon has been working on the space since 2015 at 10,400 square feet. The store at 610 East Pike Street incorporates the same technology found in the 24 or so Amazon Go locations. Shoppers can walk in, scan the QR code from their Amazon mobile app at a turnstile, carry or add whatever they want to their baskets throughout the store, and walk out when they are finished. Zero human interaction is required, though the store will staff a couple dozen people to help stock shelves and answer shoppers' questions. You are seeing a lot of big strides in this store. Cameron James, Vice President of Amazon's physical retail division, told CNBC during a tour of the grocery store on Monday. Produce is a big example of that. We're just getting started here, he said, declining to comment on how many of these grocery stores Amazon may open. I think what we're trying to do here and with all our physical stores is really work backwards from the customer and deliver some differentiation. So this is the picture of the store itself. The space in Seattle is still smaller than a typical U.S. grocery store that's about 40,000 square feet. Amazon Go Grocery is meant to stock shoppers' kitchen cabinets and help them with dinner, while Amazon Go stores are meant to serve bustling business districts during the breakfast and lunch hours, James said. He called Amazon Go Grocery a neighborhood market of sorts. The new store is stocked with about 5,000 items, including fresh produce, dairy, packaged seafood, meats, bakery treats like donuts, household goods like paper towels, plus meal kits and a full liquor section with wines and beers. Interesting. They're trying to put the liquor stores out of business. Some items, mainly in the produce department, are sourced from Whole Foods providers. Items for national brands, as well as a variety of Amazon's private labels, such as Happy Belly, are also for sale. The store includes a self-service coffee bar. Every item is priced individually, meaning no weigh-in required for produce. For example, bananas are 19 cents. Each avocado and avocados are 49 cents. Making sure Amazon's technology could track shoppers picking up and bagging their own produce in the store was the biggest incremental challenge to enable customers to just to shop and not have to worry about technology, James said. The Amazon Go grocery store is meant to complement the natural and organic brands that people can find at Whole Foods today, he said. We're not trying to be Whole Foods, James said. We're not trying to replace them. Amazon's Go location, spanning about 1,800 square feet, finally opened to the public from the middle of Amazon's Seattle campus in January 2018. The space, selling grab-and-go items such as sandwiches and snacks, was initially unveiled in late 2016. It was supposed to open to the public early 2017, but it was stuck for much longer in beta mode, only for Amazon employees as the company worked to get the complicated cashier-less technology right. Since Amazon has taken its time to get its own cashier-free technology up to speed, rivals have had more time to swoop in and mimic it, analysts have said. Two tech startups, iFi and Grab and Go, for example, are working on autonomous systems for big retailers competing with Amazon. Earlier this month, 7-Eleven, which has more than 11,000 convenience stores in North America, opened a 700 square foot cashier-less store near its corporate headquarters in Irving, Texas. The space is a pilot test and only open to employees, the company said. Walmart's wholesale division has also been testing cashier-free technology at a store in Dallas called Sam's Club now. Still, Amazon's efforts in grocery cannot be ignored. Its ambitions in the category were certainly amplified when it paid $13.7 billion in 2017 to buy the upscale grocery chain Whole Foods Market. People still go to grocery stores even with the rampant rise of online shopping, and Amazon knows that. Only about 3% of groceries are ordered online on the internet today in the United States. Because of its size and other business units, such as Amazon Web Services, analysts say Amazon is able to experiment more in retail than others without having to worry about profitability. Amazon has a market cap of more than $1 trillion. Its shares have rallied more than 20% in the past 12 months. Nobody in their right mind goes into a grocery. It is low margins with perishable food, and it's challenging to scale, said Brendan Witcher, a principal retail analyst with Forrester Research. But there's nowhere we shop more than grocery stores. That is Amazon's strategy. It doesn't need to be a profit generator. Amazon, with its more than 150 million paid Prime members globally, wants to get in front of as many consumers as possible, he said. Amazon's primary mission is to get you to say Amazon every day in your life. Amazon is the only one who can afford to make the entire grocery category a loss leader. Amazon reportedly had been forecasting annual revenue from all Amazon Go stores would skyrocket from 28 million in 2018 towards to upwards of $639 million in 2020, according to the information. But Amazon hasn't opened as many Go stores as it had initially anticipated, the report said, and operating losses from Go are still ballooning, it said. Amazon declined to comment on these numbers. Amazon's physical retail unit, which is primarily made up of Whole Foods locations, was the only division to report sales slowdown during the fourth quarter. Revenue declined 1% year over year to $4.36 billion. In addition to Whole Foods locations in its stores, Go stores, sorry, which have been concentrated in major metros such as New York, Seattle, and San Francisco, and Chicago. Amazon has 21 bookstores in 10 Amazon 4-star locations, which sell a curated selection of goods that are trending online in those stores' respective neighborhoods. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, so I'll finish anyways. The thing here is that this is just one big vending machine. Okay, 10,000, 20,000 square feet, a big vending machine, no cashiers. You know, you just basically pick up and go as you please, and that's where Amazon is trying to turn the brick and mortar store into a big vending machine as a whole. Pretty soon, you won't even have to go to a grocery store. Whatever you bought last week or you bought over a period of time, it's going to put all of that into data analytics, and then it's going to basically pre-order all of that stuff for you. And you won't have to go to the grocery store anymore. We got it going on the panel, man.
What's up, fam? How you doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, this is how you doing there? All right.
All right.
Keep going. I'm just in the middle of a couple things here very quick, but I'll chime in a minute.
All right. And what got me in this article is that they're talking about wine, beer, and liquor. Well, what happens to the local bodega who sells, you know, all the alcohol in the hood? Everybody's just gonna have to go online and buy all their alcohol. They're gonna cut those brick and mortars right out of business. Okay. So this is a game changer. But the other retailers are catching up. Walmart, even McDonald's. Well, I wouldn't say McDonald's is a retailer, but they're still involved in food and beverage. They're going to keep up too. We covered an article months ago about them having purchased or acquired an AI company so that they can automate and use artificial intelligence on their drive-through menus. Very, very innovative ideas. Yeah, so that's big stuff going on. Big stuff going on. All right, this one is from Box.com. Walmart is quietly working on an Amazon Prime competitor called Walmart Plus. When Amazon launched a funky membership program called Amazon Prime in 2005, Walmart boasted larger profits than Amazon had revenue. 15 years later, though, Prime is the key reason Amazon's dominance over Walmart in online sales. That pressure has pushed the traditional retailer to burn tens of billions of dollars to fight back, while its executives have cycled through various stages of reaction to Prime's ascent. Denial, followed by meek competition, followed by a reversal that seemed to signal Walmart wanted to stick to a free, no membership strategy. But Recode has learned that over the past 18 months, the world's largest brick and mortar retailer has explored creating its own paid membership program that would include perks that Amazon can't replicate, in part to avoid a direct comparison to Prime. Amazon now accounts for nearly 40% of all online retail sales in the United States, according to eMarketer, and Prime is a huge reason why. Walmart is a distant number two, with only a little more than 5% of the US e-commerce market. As soon as next month, Walmart plans to start publicly testing a membership program called Walmart Plus, according to sources. The program is expected to essentially launch as a rebrand of Walmart's existing delivery unlimited service, which charges customers $98 a year for unlimited same-day delivery of fresh groceries from one of the 1,600 plus market stores in the US where the program is available. The company is also considering launching Walmart Plus with a feature that would allow customers to use text messaging to place orders. Sources said that the amount of the Walmart Plus fee could still change, or the company might test multiple price points. But the long-term vision for Walmart Plus is the program to add more perks, which could include discounts on prescription drugs at Walmart pharmacies and fuel at Walmart gas stations, as well as a scan and go service that would allow shoppers to check out in Walmart stores without waiting in line, a tool Walmart briefly tested but discontinued nearly 2 years ago. Still, no additional perks beyond grocery delivery are set in stone, which has led some insiders to worry that the pressure to simply act might be supplementing a strong rollout plan and business case. According to sources, it's unlikely that a $98 annual program built exclusively around grocery delivery would be enough to successfully compete with Amazon Prime. Those overseeing the program, however, believe that testing different perks and learning from those tests will benefit both customers and businesses in the long term. A Walmart spokesperson confirmed that a membership program called Walmart Plus was in development but declined to provide other details. The reality Walmart is facing is that Prime, which boasts more than 150 million members worldwide, has become a retail wrecking ball that's impossible for competitors to ignore, even if they are hard-pressed to truly compete with all it offers. Prime costs $119 a year in the US, and it comes with unlimited one-day shipping on more than 10 million products. Same-day grocery deliveries from Whole Foods or Amazon Fresh, access to a large catalog of TV shows and movies available for online streaming, and more. Prime customers spend more and shop more frequently than Amazon's non-Prime shoppers. Even with its huge lead over all US competitors, Amazon isn't satisfied pushing into prescription drugs in 2018 with the acquisition of the online pharmacy PillPack and developing multiple grocery store concepts beyond Whole Foods. Earlier this week, Amazon opened a new high-tech supermarket that allows shoppers to pluck fresh foods like fruits, vegetables, and meats off the shelf, walk right out, and get automatically charged for the merchandise afterwards. In recent years, Amazon has also made moves for Prime to appeal to households with less disposable income that historically have favored shopping at Walmart. Amazon had added a monthly payment option for Prime fees in 2016, a 45% Prime fee discount for those on government assistance in 2017, and ways for Prime customers to pay for orders with cash. Today, more than half of Walmart's top spending families are Amazon Prime members, according to sources. While Walmart's overall grocery business is larger than Amazon's, one fear is that top Walmart customers could eventually turn to Amazon for groceries as they get sucked further into Amazon Prime suite of perks. So this is a battle. I'm not going to read this whole thing. This is a battle that was eventually going to happen. We have been talking about this for about a year or so now, that Walmart is going to have to become more of it's going to have to act more like a startup rather than a retailer. The same thing for Target, same thing for Macy's and the rest of them. They're going to have to start acting like a startup, where Amazon has understood that. They operate like a startup. So they have a better culture to go into development. All right. You know, for those of you watching, man, trying to get into information technology, now is the time to learn how to code. Python is your friend. All right, let me get to the next item on the docket. I'll skim through these real quick. I don't want to spend too much time on these. This one is from businessinsider.com. I put off retirement savings until I paid off my student loans, and now I regret that decision for 4 reasons. I think I know this person. I always knew that saving for retirement was important, but when I was saddled with student loan debt, it didn't seem like a priority. I borrowed a total of $81,000 for my education, and after getting my master's, I was determined to pay off my student loans as fast as possible. I was paying $11 per day in interest, which felt like it was a fire that had to be extinguished before I could focus on anything else. I ended up paying the last of my debt in December 2015 at 31. While I was happily debt-free, it was just the beginning of my retirement savings journey. Here's why I regret that I would start saving for retirement until I had completely paid off my student loans. Number one, I lost time and compound interest. When I first started working full-time at 22, I had $23,000 of student loan debt in my undergraduate degree. I got a job in the nonprofit sector making $30,000. The job didn't come with a retirement match. And given my low income and debt load, I decided to forego savings. I figured I could save for retirement later when I earned more money. 3 years later, I was making $38,000 but then I decided to quit my job full-time. Decided to quit my full-time job to move across the country and go to graduate school at New York University. This move required me to borrow $58,000 more in student loans. The later period of that time in which I saved for retirement kept getting pushed back. I was so intensely focused on how much interest was accruing that I was failed to realize how much interest I could earn by saving for retirement. Number two, I didn't create the habit. Success requires creating good habits. While paying down my student loans became a habit and savings for my emergency fund was automated, I never created the habit of saving for retirement. So when I started saving for retirement at 31, after my debt was paid off, it was in chunks. At that point, I was self-employed and had a fluctuating income. Number three, I started at zero. When your net worth is negative for so long, getting to zero seems amazing. But when the high of paying off debt wore off, I realized I was starting at zero for retirement savings. So while I paid off a total of $81,000 plus interest, which was a huge accomplishment, I then felt daunted by starting over completely when it came to my retirement savings. The same dread and paralyzing feeling I had before I got serious about my debt followed me as I began to save for retirement. Feeling behind makes my anxiety surge. I am now 35 and it has been 4 years. I paid off my student loans. I've been saving for retirement over the past several years, and it's nice to be building wealth instead of paying off debt. I always say that it's better to be paying for your future or your present than your past. While I'm happy that I'm started the journey, I feel so behind at 35. I'm not nearly where I should be when it comes to retirement savings, and it feels difficult to believe that I can catch up. So what this person is articulating here in this sort of op-ed is that paying off your student loan sounds really good. I heard of people paying off $100,000 in 2 years or 3 years. But what did you really get from that? You think paying off $100,000 is a big achievement? Why not put that $100,000 into a fucking house where you're gonna have some equity? There's no equity in paying off a student loan debt. I don't understand this. So I'm a bit different about this. I just feel like you know, we're coming at this from a different angle, and I think that we're getting caught up trying to appease the government and these institutions with some of their some of their rhetoric about paying off student loans. I just think that's kind of silly. All right. Next one is from CNBC.com. Nearly 1 in 3 American workers run out of money before payday, even those earning over $100,000. Going extra light at the grocery store, cutting down on medical supplies, buying clothing and household supplies secondhand. These are just some of the many ways many Americans are making it work when money is tight. For about a third of Americans, this is a regular financial stress, with 32% running out of money before their next paycheck hits, according to the new survey fielded by Salary Finance of 2,700 U.S. adults working at companies with over 500 employees. Amy, 36, is intimately familiar with the running short on cash and using these workarounds, especially during tax season. That's in spite of the fact that she and her husband make about $50,000 a year, just short of the average household income in the U.S. Tax time hurts for us because we don't get a refund. We get a bill, she tells CNBC Make It. Her husband, the primary earner, works for a company in a different state so that, so state income taxes aren't taken out, she said. While they typically get a federal refund, they end up owing the state more than the federal refund. So who's running out of money between paychecks? Less than 15,000 at 40%, they're the highest. 15 to 25 grand, about the same, or is the same. 25 to 40 grand, the same. So those who earn less than 15,000 have the same problems as those who earn 40,000. Okay. And those who earn 40,000 have the same problems as those who earn 100,000. This is absurd. You cannot run your country this way long term. This is not something that's sustainable over the next decade. If this continues, you don't have a country anymore. You don't have any economic stability. It's not going to work. I can't imagine that people who earn below 50,000 have the same problems that people at 100,000 have. It doesn't make any sense. All right, I'm not going to read that whole thing, but that's the gist of it. All right, next item on the docket is from MarketWatch.com. I'm 59 and my husband and I earn $500,000 a year, but have credit card debt and nothing saved for retirement. What should we do? This is a Nagone sort of question. Just as an FYI, we're not certified financial planners. If you want a certified financial planner, go to CFP.net, look up one in your area. My husband.
Hey, Mike, we used to goof back in the day, man. We see people like this who are making money and just totally blowing themselves up and just wondering what the hell they're gonna do. We used to say, you want to lose 10 ugly pounds quick? Cut off your head. You know, we just kind of laugh. Look, man, these guys got to start thinking. These are people who are they have no kind of, they have no spending limits. They have no discipline at all. These are undisciplined people thinking they're going to continue to make money for the rest of their lives. And, that show's going to end at some point in time. So they're going to have to wake up. And that's who these people are. I just want to say that real quick. All right, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
My husband is 65 and a lawyer and partner in his firm with a thriving practice. I am 59 years old and we have 3 children. And I was fortunate to be a stay-at-home mom. I now work part-time, which is essentially just play money. Although I'm college educated, I never had a career outside of the home. Our youngest recently graduated from college and is now working full-time. We provided a college education for all 3 children, and we were easily able to afford it. We make a very good income, $500,000 a year, although we live in an expensive city and our income tax bracket is astronomical. Our oldest child, a son, had mental health and addiction issues for a decade. We spent a small fortune trying to help him by sending him to multiple rehabs, sober living, housing, psychiatric counseling, living expenses when he was unable to work or go to school, paying for his college education, etc. He took his own life several years ago, which left us utterly devastated. We have tried our best to move forward, but money for our retirement is simply not there. The pluses that my husband is healthy, fit, and energetic, and has an excellent law practice. Assuming he remains in good health, he can work for many more years and plans to do just that. We own a home that will be paid for in 7 years, and at this time is worth around $1.4 million. If we sold it tomorrow, we could net $1 million in equity. Our city is rapidly growing and home prices have become very high, so it would be difficult to find a home for less than $750,000 if we were lucky. Do you advise sitting tight as our home continues to appreciate, or try to downsize and pay for a home in full with cash? We bought our house for a song when the market was down. We have emptied our IRAs and have a great deal of credit card debt, which I hope to have paid off in full in the next 18 months, and we'd like to save for retirement. Carl, this gotta be easy for you.
Yeah, the first thing this guy's got to do is get rid of their debt. This credit card debt is what kills most people out here because they just put everything on the card.
Mm-hmm.
Using the cash they spend, and it's really silly. That's why, if you're smart, you tend to use more of your debit cards, if anything. But people are just spending down on these credit cards, and there are fees attached to it. There's a rate attached to it, so you're running up a lot of highly expensive debt. Their major game right now is they don't need to have to downsize their home if they can manage a home pretty decently. Their key thing right now is to cut their spending. Cut their overhead spending right now and spend down and cut down, pay off that credit card debt right now. Get that debt from underneath them as fast as possible. That's one of the first things that they should be really trying to take care of right now, is get that up off of their backside. Don't know how old their kids are or whatever. If their kids are of age where they're getting ready to go.
They all moved out. Kids are grown.
The kids are gone, right? Well, if the kids are gone, get that credit card debt out, and then look to downsize your home once you've gotten that, because that'll give you a lot more cash to operate with. You'll have more cash from the sale of that house that you can put away into your savings or into your retirement plan, where you can put that into an IRA, or a different separate account that you could use to definitely help you for your retirement down the road, and just really cruise and start living like how they started out when they were youngsters. Now they're empty nesters. They got nothing else going on. They don't have to pay for anybody else. Get that debt off of you. Sell that home once you've gotten that credit card debt off you. Get that home out of there since you got a lot of cash going. Put that into your retirement plan and move on from there. No risky investments. Don't do anything crazy. And they should be able to put themselves back into a fairly decent cash, positive cash position where they've got, opportunity to put some money away for their retirement down the line, depending on how many other years that they may have left. If they can put $3 to $4 million together in their IRA and everything else like that, and put all that kind of money and develop that kind of cash, and get some, I would have to say, some type of kind of return. If they get into a decent return on their money over the next 10, 15 years, and they have $2 to $3 million in overall cash assets, they can retire on that nicely and not have to worry about too much. But if they're sitting here right now getting torn out the frame the way they're doing it, that shit sounds crazy to me. Sounds like they have no real, they don't have any controls over what they're spending. They're not controlling that.
Well,
Keep that debt off.
Yeah, well, she said her husband is a lawyer, so I guess it's not just everyone else getting fucked over with his business, his own family too. But but my thing is, why do you have to live in that high income, that high tax bracket part of the city? Why don't you just move 20 miles out, man?
It's convenient. It's an ego thing for them. They like being there. There's a lot of things socially tied up into being into that area. They got all this working in their mind, and I gotta move. I gotta get out of this area. Oh my gosh, what will some of my friends think? Who knows what all kind of shit's going on with them? But a lot of it's psychological. You cut some of that shit back to the fat meat. They'll be all right. Get rid of that credit card debt. Once they've gotten that debt paid off, then look to sell the fucker, sell the house. Move into a condo or something that is a lot cheaper. Take the proceeds of that sale, put that into their retirement account, retirement fund, and begin to start to plan to cruise off into the sunset. That's what these guys need to do. But if their egos are not properly placed, they're gonna have issues. And if they're not, it seems like to me that they haven't really been very serious about watching how they spend. And they're gonna have to do that now. They're gonna have to, do that. That's their issue, man. I mean, they can get back up on top of the game quickly, but it's gonna take a little discipline for them. Yes, downsizing is something that they should definitely do, but get that debt off of them first. Get that credit card debt off. They can pay that shit off. Get that debt off their ass. Get it off. Get it off. And you don't want to have to take the proceeds of your home that you make on a sale and put that into covering your debt. If you can pay that debt down right now, that'll be better. And then the proceeds of your house will yield you that much more on your retirement fund down the road.
I would say car too. I would say car too. More than likely. Yeah.
Absolutely. If they could downsize their car, downsize their ride as well. They don't need to drive big, expensive, stupid rides and everything else like that. But people, it's an ego thing for a lot of people. They don't have to have that. But some people, oh no, I gotta be in my Jag. I gotta be in this. I gotta be in that. Get
out of those big Escalades, man.
Get out of those big Escalades.
Appreciating asset.
Exactly.
Crazy. It's crazy that this is happening, man, in America, man.
I mean, and this game is geared to suck you dry. It's geared to blow up your credit. It's geared to have you paying huge fees on spent money. It's designed to separate you from this. It's that big sucking sound you hear going out to the left is all this unnecessary cash that you're spending for no reason. The service on that debt is huge. Get that bitch off of you. That's carrying a big white elephant. That's a big giant white ass elephant sitting on top of your shoulders. Get that shit off you. Makes no sense. No sense at all. And if they're gonna now start going to spend off of cards, spend off your debit card. Okay, have your separate account that you have a bank account that you're gonna start spending just off of your debit card. So that'll also put you on a certain limit as well. So you don't blow up all your cash doing that either. But these guys are, the lawyers and whatever they're doing, these people are just undisciplined folks, and they're not thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, she's saying she's working part-time and that's just play money. No, that's all money invested into getting off that debt, man.
Not thinking.
45,000.
Not thinking. That should be pay down your debt. Put all that money to the side and just bang, pay down the debt. Every day you sit there, your interest is being compounded. Get that debt off you. Shit is useless. That debt is of no value to you at all. Zero value.
Mm-hmm.
Zero value. And the only thing it can do is hurt you down the line. Because if you miss payments or something happens, God forbid, then that debt is sitting there to literally gobble you like Pac-Man. Fuck that. Get that shit out of there. Don't have that debt working on you. Bad thing to have. Bad dog. You know, get that out of there.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move into some Pan-African talk, man. Smart Barbados Week. So this happened a few months ago, 2019, but I just wanted to bring it up because some of the topics that they've been discussing or that they had on their itinerary is actually relevant to some of the stuff that we've been discussing the last month or so since I came back from the continent. Keep talking about that. So let me go over the event. Smart Barbados Week 2019 will take the form of a 4-day symposium hosted by the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technology, MIST, in partnership with Barbados Chamber of Commerce, BCCI, the Barbados International Business Association, BIBA, Internet Society of Barbados Chapter, ISOC, Small Business Association of Barbados. It seeks to engage workforces with the wider Barbadian public with knowledge needed to support our transition to a smart Barbados. This means adapting to new technologies, transforming traditional structures and working practices in our public and private sector organizations to new digital standards. So these are the sponsors, you know, some pretty big ones, some pretty big hitters here. The speakers, you have the Minister of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technology, Information Technology Scientist from Estonia, Special Advisor to the Ministry, to the Minister of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technology. See a lot of PhDs up in here. Global Information Technology Leader, Claudette McGowan. Panel discussions around the value of components and national innovation systems and strategies. This is happening in Barbados, a small island. They're having these discussions. Mindsets and attitudes, creating a culture of innovation, action, and excellence. These are the discussions that they were having. And that's a very interesting discussion. Mindsets and attitudes. Creating a culture of innovation, action, and excellence. Introduction to civ tech in Barbados grounding conditions. So they're talking about civil technology. Guided workshop session as well, steps to innovative Barbados. National digital transformation strategies. What does Smart Barbados mean to you? Models of national digital transformation. Current and proposed Smart Barbados initiatives, value and opportunities for collaboration. Guided workshop sessions, bringing together components of national strategy and the digital policy model canvas. Then day 3. Perspectives by representatives of manufacturing, tourism, agriculture, wholesale, retail, banking, and finance. Transformation insights. Steps to promote digital education in Barbados. So those are sort of discussions that they're having, and building trust in institutions in the age of smart technology. information media, digital literacy. So getting their people up to speed. Securing Barbados digital infrastructure, data protection act alone is not enough. So they're talking about cybersecurity. Technology enabled action and education. Internet addiction and attention economy. So it's not just opioids that people are addicted to. It's these are YouTube streets. Inclusive transformation, leaving no one behind as we take service online. Implications of digitalization and advanced technologies like AI for future employment opportunities in Barbados. So they're talking about using AI in the Caribbean. Those are the sort of discussions that they were having, yeah, like Hard Fork Rich says, conference touching on all key points. Yeah, very important stuff. I don't see how anybody can ignore this type of stuff, man. A lot of people say that, a lot of people, I should say, Black Americans think that everybody's living in huts, in these other countries. They're not living like that, man. They are not living like that, fam. They are getting it in. And so that's what's going on. So I'm mad that I missed it, but I wasn't around for it anyways. But definitely next time they have it, I will be jumping on that. All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. Try to fly through this. All right, this is from quartz.com. Renewable energy investments taking the big strides in sub-Saharan Africa. Africa's leading economies are increasingly looking to wind energy to power homes. It's part of a trend towards varying forms of clean energy across the continent. South Africa, the continent's most advanced economy, is a clear leader in renewable energy policy and projects, shows research by Bloomberg. For example, it will lead the drive for wind power installations with an additional 3.3 gigawatts added to its energy capacity by 2024, as it both tries to cope with the problems at its national power company, Eskom, and tries to slowly reduce addiction to coal. Kenya is also a major leader in Open Africa's largest wind farm last year and is on course to soon be able to claim 100% renewable energy from a range of sources, including geothermal and solar. Investment in clean energy in sub-Saharan Africa jumped to $7.4 billion in 2018, up from $2.3 billion in 2017. South Africa accounted for $4 billion of investment driven by major onshore wind project in 2018. So this little graph right here is showing you the countries involved in renewable energy investments: Kenya, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Senegal, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Mauritania, and Djibouti. So obviously Kenya is leading the way for right now, but things do change. Clean renewable energy is being adopted across sub-Saharan Africa, boosted by policy incentives, backing by donors to overcome the lack of local finance and developing de-risking mechanisms for reluctant governments. But it's not all plain sailing. Governments are struggling to afford existing power purchase agreements and will have to make hard choices if they are to find room for the renewables. While clean energy policies are somewhat limited to tax incentives, BNEF analysts think low hydro availability and a growing reluctance to finance coal will boost investments in renewable energies in the long run. That's good. That's a good news. It helps that gas and coal are somewhat curtailed by the cost of infrastructure required to implement new projects. So we talked about renewable energies before on the continent, but this is an explosive market right now. When I was over there a few weeks ago, this was the discussion. You know, how do you create infrastructure development? Well, you can't have a thriving economy without any infrastructure, and renewable energy is a part of that discussion. How do you create microgrids? How do you create medium grids? How do you, not, that last mile, so that you're not dependent upon these larger grids, and that you're not relying on coal, for coal-fired power plants. That's just not sustainable over time. It eventually, will have an effect on your ecosystem. So whoever comes up with more radical solutions, man, is going to be able to get awarded some of these big contracts that's sitting on the table. When I spoke last year at a summit, for African cultural intelligence, there were $1 billion contracts on the table, up to $1 billion, if you can come up with a solution. All right. All right, this is from the BBC.com. How Africa hopes to gain from the new scramble. All right, expand this out. In recent years, Africans have become used to seeing their leaders accumulate air miles while honoring invitations to attend a series of Africa-themed summits held around the world, often advertised as win-win partnerships. Last year, Japan, Russia, and China hosted African presidents and heads of government. Last month, 15 African leaders attended the UK Africa Investment Summit in London. And invitations have probably already been sent for similar events reportedly planned for France, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey this year. What's the interest? A mixture of the continent's rich mineral resources, unexploited agricultural land, and its influence 54 votes at the UN, stemming a growing threat of Islamist militancy, economic immigration, and anxiety, some say racist, about its burgeoning population are among the issues behind the renewed interest. There has never been a greater need for constructive international engagement on the continent. Besides, the global economy could reap significant rewards from positive engagement, Dr. Moyo wrote. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta agrees, saying during a recent visit to the US that Africa is more than just a continent producing security threats or unregulated migration that must be contained, but that it offers investment opportunities to the world. However, he warned against the frenzied contest between China, US, Russia, and other countries. I have noticed conversations in the Western countries and their counterparts in Asia and the Middle East have returned to competition over Africa. In some cases, behaving like Africa is for the taking. Well, I want to tell you it is not, Mr. Kenyatta added, spoken like a true Pan-Africanist. In 2013, African leaders under the African Union agreed on a blueprint to tackle the myriad challenges the continent faces. The plan was dubbed Agenda 2063. It sets out a vision, among others, to end wars on the continent, develop infrastructure, and allow freedom of movement on the continent. Another flagship project, the African Continental Free Trade Area, the world's largest free trade pact in terms of countries involved, is projected to improve and boost trade amongst African nations. Critics, however, say that African Continental Free Trade Area, which comes into effect in July, is not a panacea and faces big hurdles, especially protectionism policies and poor transport infrastructure in member states. Flagship projects of Agenda 2063 connect all African capitals and commercial centers through high-speed train network, accelerate intra-Africa trade and boost Africa's trading position in the global marketplace. The development of the Inga Dam and DR Congo to generate 43,200 megawatts of power. Remove restrictions on Africans' abilities to travel, work, and live within their own continent. Ending all wars, civil conflicts, gender-based violence, violent conflicts, and preventing genocide. Establishment of a single air transport market. Strengthening Africa's space industry. So Africans are talking about going to space. Create an African virtual and e-university. So they're talking about creating their own EDX sort of platform. Develop an Encyclopedia Africana to provide an authoritative resource on the authentic history of Africa and African life. So they're talking about controlling the narrative now and taking it away from outsiders. However, the AU is struggling to implement Agenda 2063 because the organization lacks the carrot and stick influence to corral member countries to focus on the agreed plans. Moore, a former Minister of Public Works in Liberia, says, he argues that with many African countries increasingly saddled with debt and using their resources to pay off foreign loans, they have been distracted from the Grand Continental Plan. He says that they should take advantage of the intensified interest in the continent to find affordable ways of improving the transport infrastructure, especially roads, to help boost their economies. While the Agenda 2063 makes a big play of high-speed rails, roads are the predominant mode of transportation in Africa, carrying at least 80% of goods and 90% of passengers, according to the African Development Bank, AFDB. The poor state of the road infrastructure in 49 countries and sub-Saharan African countries has led to isolation of people from basic education, health services, trade hubs, and economic opportunities, the AFDB said. Only 43% of the roads in Africa are paved, and 30% of all paved roads on the continent are in one country, South Africa. Mr. Moore, who is currently a senior policy fellow at the Center for Global Development in the US, says, it's almost impossible to build a modern society and a modern economy without roads. He gives examples of the 2014 Ebola crisis in West Africa, which happened during the rainy season. What began as a health crisis was actually an infrastructure crisis, he says. Taking the blood specimen from the patient to the lab became invalid because of how long it took. Mr. Moore says that research and investment in building paved roads that can withstand heavy rain seasons would transform the continent. There is no good to set up wonderful targets if you cannot measure them. The African Union agenda has 255 targets, almost half are not quantifiable, he adds. Another handicap several African countries face is the lack of effective bureaucracy working in government. Dr. Ken Opalo from the Georgetown University told BBC, something he says democratic African countries can learn from China. What makes China succeed isn't autocracy, it's bureaucratic effectiveness. The capacity for making and implementing government policy doesn't fall in order when you have free elections. It is therefore ridiculous at the moment to expect things to change in countries like South Sudan, Central African Republic, or even Malawi. The AU admits there have been challenges, and it is planning to roll out a platform to enable it to best monitor implementation of the Agenda 2063 targets. The organization's vice chairman, Cordy Thomas Kwesi, said recently. We also welcome criticism, he added. Curiously, Africa's most urgent problem, youth unemployment, is not listed as a flagship agenda in 2063 project, but according to AU officials, all projects are aimed at creating a conducive environment for job creation. Africa's population is set to double by 2050 to 2.2 billion, according to projections from the United Nations Population Division, putting pressure on governments to create meaningful employment. Another worrying statistic is that while global poverty levels are dropping, they are rising in Africa, according to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The organization projects that Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo together will be home to 44% of the world's poorest people in 30 years' time if current trends continue. The agricultural sector, which in most countries in Africa offers the best opportunity to lift millions out of poverty, is largely untapped and slowed down by lack of investment. Trapped in desperation, hopelessness, many young people have moved to the cities. We now have urbanization without jobs, and instead of investing in manufacturing, we are seeing a lot of consumption cities being built. They provide jobs but rely on importation. It is another multifaceted challenge the continent has to grapple with. So they talk about lack of investment, and they're right about that. But that's why countries like Rwanda have opened up their markets to foreign investment. You know, you don't have to be a citizen. You can come in there into their special economic zone and actually open up shop. And so that's what's going on. I talked about Black Americans being able to actually invest in some of these areas. You can launch your own startups and successful businesses in those countries if you just got your weight up. But it has to be sustainable. It can't be a one-off deal where it only worked for a few months out of the year, or it even works for a year at best, and then it stops. You know, it has to be sustainable throughout, you know, the whole entire throughout the whole entire lifespan of development. So, all right, move on to the next item on the docket. All right, next item on the docket is from Bloomberg. Ghana is fast becoming frontier investors' new best friend. Expand this out. Midway through the last quarter of 2019, investors looking at Ghana saw its own economy creeping inflation in a currency that had declined against the dollar for 25 straight years. Barely 6 weeks winning into the new year, the picture has changed. The cedi is the best performing currency in the world in 2020. Investors fell over their feet to buy into the nation's $3 billion Eurobond issue, and foreigners are piling into the country's local currency debt. Investors who worried last year about spending ahead of an election scheduled for December are now lauding the government for fiscal prudence and financial reforms. We have been too cautious on Ghana, said SocGen strategist Jason Daw and Phoenix Kalin, who recommend buying the country's CD bonds. It has been the best performing major market in Africa in the past 2 months, attributable to greater fiscal discipline, commitments to reforms, and improved currency management. Investors demonstrated that vote of confidence when they placed orders for almost 5 times the amount on offer on Ghana's Eurobond sale 2 weeks ago, pushing the yield down well below the initial price target. And at the first local currency bond sale of the year on January 16, foreign investors bought more than 80% of their 1.4 billion CDs of securities, compared with an average holding of 37% over the past 2 years. Reforms started by the West African nation 3 years ago are now paying off. They include outlawing large deficits and an aggressive banking sector overhaul that cut the number of lenders by a third to 23, lowering liquidity and credit risk. The central bank has been effective in lowering inflation, which has been in single digits for 2 years even after an uptick in November. The regulator also started foreign exchange forwards auctions in October to support the cedi. It shows in the performance of Ghana's assets. Yields on existing Eurobonds have dropped to record lows, and the cedi has gained 6.6% since the beginning of January, well ahead of the 2.4% advance for the second best currency, the Egyptian pound. That's wiped out more than half of last year's 13% slump. Investors seem confident that the central bank is on top of its game. Anthony Asser, head of treasury at GCB Bank Limited, said by phone, when it comes to the budget, they sort of believe it'll be consistent with the fiscal restraint, even though it is an election year. Ghana cut its budget deficit to 3.8% of gross domestic product in 2018 from 8.7% in 2016, after President Nana government passed legislation to cap the shortfall at 5% of GDP. Last year's deficit was in line with the target of 4.5%, even after the country exited a 4-year International Monetary Fund program in April. Although growth slowed in the third quarter, it is forecast to remain strong this year at 6.8% from an average of 7.7% in the last 3 years. So, Ghana has the hottest currency right now. I heard a live stream earlier this week talking about Africa is a vertical poor market. How can this be the case? This article says otherwise. That Ghana has the most valued currency right now in the market, the hottest currency on the market right now. So that tells you the trajectory of where markets are going for 2020. All right. Let's share my screen again. Move on to the next item on the docket. Hartford Rich says Rwanda needs to mirror the business model that Estonia has, but do it for the Black diaspora. Digital citizenship, full citizenship for diasporan Blacks, and just business for other ethnic groups. Yeah, you can't really do that because diaspora Blacks don't have the same wealth. And number two, Rwanda doesn't look at it from that perspective because they're East African. So their connection to African Americans would be very limited, not in the same way that West African governments would have it. That's why Ghana is so popular versus Rwanda. All right, next on the docket is from Quartz.com. Goldman Sachs joined a $55 million funding round in South African fintech startup Jumo. African fintech has scored yet another major investment in win. Jumo, a 5-year-old fintech startup, has raised $55 million in debt and equity funding. The latest investment round saw participation from existing investors, including Goldman Sachs, Ode Asset Management, and Leapfrog Investments, as well as new unnamed investors. It brings Jumo's total funding raised to nearly $150 million and follows two major rounds in 2018 when the company raised $64.5 million. Although Goldman Sachs is best known as a Wall Street fixture, it has been steadily building an impressive portfolio of African startup investment in the last few years. It has previously led an investment round in Jumo, but also e-commerce leader Jumia, Kenyan agritech startup Twiga, and Kobo 360, a logistics startup in Nigeria. Last month, the Wall Street stalwart acquired a banking license to operate in South Africa. Jumo operates in 5 African countries: Ghana, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, where it partners with financial service providers and telecoms operators to offer lending, savings, and insurance services to their vast customer bases. The company says it has disbursed $1.8 billion in loans since being founded and has now served 15 million customers. Jumo South African founder Andrew Watkins Ball says the company's next phase will see it develop more products and open up shop in Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire this year. The company, which already operates in Pakistan, also plans to launch in India this year as well. The fund raised comes amid intense interest in the potential of financial technology startups in Africa, notably from global payments giants. In a landmark deal last November, Visa invested $200 million for a 20% stake in Nigerian payments processor InterSwitch, confirming the company as Africa's first fintech unicorn. There's also marked interest from China too. OPay and PalmPay, two payment services operating in Nigeria, received over $210 million in funding, predominantly from Chinese investors, over a 5-month period last year. So, Africa is really hot for investment in startups. So if you're going to invest in the continent, invest on startups. You really can't lose at this point, because they're partnering with bigger enterprises. So Man Friday says that if Rwanda or any African nation was really Pan-African, they would consider citizenship for the diasporans. But in reality, most African states are African nationalists, not Pan-African. Well, Pan-Africanism is a Western concept and not an African concept. It's a Western concept. So that would be the case. All right, let me get to the next item on the docket. All right. Hard Fork Rich says, hopefully we get more West African countries on the level of Rwanda sooner than later. I think they're already there. one of the things I think people focus on too much is the citizenship aspect. And the reason why I think ADOS people tend to focus on citizenship so much because they want to be a part of something rather than to just integrate themselves into the environment. You don't need to I'm sorry, I got distracted there for a second. You don't need to be a citizenship. You don't need to be a citizen of those countries to actually partake in their advancement. And so we get caught up too often trying to wave a citizenship card or some form of status of dual citizenship to one up something or one up somebody else. The people on the ground don't even worry about citizenship. They know that they're citizens, but that's the extent of it. So they're not usually fighting for something. Whereas I think what happens with a lot of Western blacks or diasporans is that they're always worried about status. Even when they go to the continent, it's status. They focus on the status. If you're going to be there, then you're going to actually have to contribute. And I think contribution is going to be more important than status itself. Mufasa Shabazz says, if we invest in startups, what leverage do I have if they don't pay? I'm not sure what you mean by don't pay. You're a stakeholder once you invest. All right, next item on the docket is from Bloomberg Markets and Finance. Why Jamaica's stock market is red hot. We'll listen to this.
Stock exchange is the world's best performing stock market, producing more than 500% returns over the past 5 years. Not long ago, we spoke with the Jamaica Stock Exchange Managing Director in November about the boom. Take a listen.
The business people, the consumers, we are optimistic about what is going on in Jamaica. And over those couple of years, what we also have been doing is encouraging Jamaican companies to do better in terms of their corporate governance, training, etc. So we have been putting in the hard work for the companies to perform well, and it is paying dividend.
The island is now testing the depths of the market with the nation's biggest ever IPO, plus recent demand for ETFs that track Jamaica's performance. So for more, let's bring in David Mullings, Blue Maho Capital Partners founder, chairman, and CEO, currently working to launch one of those ETFs in the US and Canada. So everyone's looking at those juicy returns, but not easy access to it for American investors. What are the hurdles at this point for you to get an ETF into the US market?
So thankfully, the SEC changed the rules around November of last year, 2019. So it's simpler, it's faster, and it's cheaper to launch one. But if you looked at NYSE listings, for example, to list an ETF, the biggest problem is actually that we have a market cap minimum of 100 million US dollars for 90% of the weight. So that eliminates the majority of the actual stocks on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. It eliminates the junior market, which is also booming. So that's one of the issues. The second one, though, is that we have a custodian issue. If you look at the 40 Act, this is a 40 Act fund. Jamaica is not a 17F5 location, a jurisdiction. So we have to secure an eligible foreign custodian. We've been working on that, thankfully. Dwayne Morris and Nanette Hyde have been really helpful, and we're working with a really good team of ETF players. And what we've done is put together an ETF with 26 stocks, 90% exposure to Jamaica. Now, once we solve that custodian problem, we can then finally get it launched.
So that's one option. Another option that's been talked about is just taking Blue Maho Capital itself and listing that, and that could then be a vehicle for some investors to be exposed to.
Right. And so the original idea, I'm a Warren Buffett fan. So we wanted to do
Everyone's a Warren Buffett.
Everybody should be a Warren Buffett fan. So we looked at Blue Maho Capital as being an investment holding company that could do both public and private company options. To give an example, the ETF wouldn't be able to exist in a company called Cygnus Credit Investments. This is the largest alternative investment firm in the Caribbean. We participated in their IPO last year as a test run, just to understand moving money between the US and Jamaica, working with our custodians, Jamaican National Fund Managers. The US dollar stock we bought, they listed USD and JMD. The USD is up 60% in a year, or the JMD one is up over 140%. Our ETF wouldn't get access to that. So we think it's going to be better to have an ETF and also look at Blue Capital itself listing. And we're working closely with an investment bank here in New York that's working with us on that.
So you've identified a handful of companies that I guess are either Jamaican or they have heavily exposure to Jamaica that reach that market cap threshold imposed by the SEC. If an investor is buying into this, what are the big sectors that would encompass? What kind of areas?
So I love that question. Jamaica's sectors are not as diverse as the US, but we still have some key ones. The biggest one will be financials. If we look at any emerging market, when they start to grow and you're moving people into the middle class from working class, they need financial services. So that usually grows 4 to 5 times faster than GDP. So NCB Financial Group, for example, owned by Michael Leachin, a Jamaican-Canadian billionaire. That's a great one in our opinion, and a simple reason why we think Jamaica is a great option, perception versus reality. If you had $100,000 and he invested in 2002, and he looked at Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, he did an S&P 500 index fund, and he could buy NCB stock. So this is Jamaica. Nobody would expect to look at that. As of June 30th last year, 2019, the S&P 500 money, 100K will be about 363,000. So good return, can't complain. The Buffett stock, Berkshire, would be 444,000. If you had bought NCB though and held all through the IMF problems, today, June 30th, 2019, it would have been worth $2.79 million.
So, I mean, if you're walking into the office of a portfolio manager here in the US or in some other major country, I mean, what then becomes the selling point? I mean, beyond just, the economic boom and other things that are going on in Jamaica, from an investment standpoint, I mean, what do you sell them on? Is it just sort of the nearshoring opportunity for US companies or what?
So I think nearshoring is one, but more importantly, they need to think of Singapore in the Western Hemisphere. I think that's where it is. Jamaica has the
Singapore in the Western Hemisphere. Okay.
Jamaica has a 7th.
That's a bold claim.
Well, it should be. I mean, Jamaica has the 7th largest natural harbor in the world, similar to Singapore. We're next door to one of the largest markets, just like Singapore is with China. Jamaica is here with the US. If you close your eyes coming out of the Panama Canal, you run aground in Jamaica.
Real quickly, in that clip we played, the CEO of the Jamaican Stock Exchange, she talked about the need to improve corporate governance in the meantime for Jamaican-listed companies. What kind of evidence is there that that's happening?
So they have mentorship programs for the junior market itself. And then we obviously have NASDAQ's platform is now running the stock exchange. So that has allowed them to bring other people down there to help with corporate governance. And I've spoken to some of the CEOs in Jamaica who are using Harvard business case studies for their governance.
All right. I hope everybody was able to hear that. Let me know if you're able to hear it, or if you were able to hear it. Not sure if anybody was able to hear it. Okay. All right, so there, the Jamaican minister is actually claiming that Jamaica is the Singapore of the West. So basically, large ports, transport, in new market investment, because they partner with NASDAQ to drive their stock market exchange. And so what's happening here is that Jamaica has become ripe for investment. And so the proximity they are to the US is the same as Singapore is to China. And that's why there was such a bold claim made. Okay. That claim was made with confidence, because it has become the hottest market in the Caribbean right now, as of right now. So saying all of that, there, the West African prime minister and presidents have traveled to the Caribbean last summer. Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta actually went there, as well as the Ghanaian president has also traveled there as well for a Pan-African visit. So, like somebody else said in the chat, that there's two forms of Pan-Africanism, and I think those on the ground here look at Pan-Africanism from one view, and your governance aspect of Pan-Africanism is looked at completely different. And so, I want to respond to the comments in the chat real quick. Mufasa says, we need citizenship. I plan on integrating in, and I want full access. I don't want to be used and not be included. We've had enough of that here. And so I think there's room to have discussions about both. But when you look at the Chinese investment into the United States, a lot of those Chinese investments are not by citizens, man. And so they're doing just fine investing into these markets and not having any say over what happens politically here. Same thing for Russian investments in the United States. Russia and China hold major investments in real estate here, and yet we're still not seeing the connection that they don't have full citizenship here either. Okay. So I'm just making this point so that people understand that when you talk about having citizenship in these areas, trust and believe that you're not going to shift the tide on the continent like that with just one vote. It doesn't work that way. Man Friday says, I think the diasporans are looking for a higher level of incentive than other Westerners. Yeah, I agree with that, Man Friday. I agree with that. Diaspora L says there are two types of Pan-Africanism, socialists and nationalists. I think the first president of Ghana versus Dr. Amos Wilson. Yeah, good point. Engineering Cannabis says investment in startups does not only involve capital, but also intellectual capital, which is symbiotic. You have access on how the technology is applied, then you can use that same technology in another way. Yeah, Engineering Cannabis hit the nail on the head. Mufasa says don't pay out dividends. Yeah, they're not. That's not the way how investment in startups work. And I think Engineering Cannabis hit the nail on the head. That's not the way how it works. Gabe A says citizenship allows for people to vote on policy and leaders. How isn't that an advantage for individuals who invest in the economy? Yeah, but that's not the main focus of Western diasporans. They're not concerned about that. Most of them don't even understand how the political structure even works over there. They don't even understand their own political structure in their own country. So why would they be concerned about that? They're not really concerned about that. Most countries don't allow you to have dual citizenship anyways. So I don't really consider that to be a negative. Diaspora EL says status matters, but not how Western diasporans think. Political status, social status. Yeah, that's exactly my point too, Diaspora. Man Friday says she didn't say where that investment drive was coming from in Jamaica. Yeah, it's coming from Western markets. Canadian and American markets are driving the investment. Mufasa says Jamaica is about to be a major stop for trade transport soon. Yeah, because they have a large harbor, like the brother said in the video. And so that's what's going to be the main economic driver, because you can dump your goods off from China and these other places right at Jamaica, because it becomes a transportation route, because it has such big ports. Yeah, engineering, engineering in the chat, not engineering cannabis, but the other engineering says, Gabe A, citizenship in every country is based on merit, right? So why should it be different in other countries? The question is, what are you bringing to the table? Yeah, that's always been the question for a lot of countries as to why they should give citizenship to diasporans. Africa is not lacking in melanated people, man. They got more than enough melanated people over there. It's about 900 million of them over there. They're not lacking for that. Yeah, I don't hold my my hopes on citizenship. You know, as long as the markets are open for investment, I don't see why. I don't see that as a driving factor. Because you can live there on a visa. I mean, people come to this country on a visa all the time, and they seem to do just fine. I'm not saying anything negative or critical of your comments. I'm just saying, take that into consideration. Man Friday says the Ghanaian premier went to Barbados as well. Yeah, I remember that. Mufasa Shabazz says, if all you want to do is invest, I can understand no citizenship. Living and simply investing are two different things. Actually, it's living there would actually be investing too, because what would you be doing if you did go there, right? You would have to actually have something to sustain yourself. And if you want to go over there to live, then, and you're not really bringing anything with you, then you're going to be screwed either way. Yeah, Mufasa says, can Jamaica become the next Singapore? Is an interesting video on Jamaica. Diaspora aid return are hiring people and investing. I'm not sure I understand that last statement. Man Friday says Black Westerners have Western level skills. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with that. Because if they had Western level skill, I mean, they have Western level education, but not Western level skill. Because if they did, they would be applicable in their own markets, and they're not really there in their own markets. Yeah, you would have to be a major contributor to the said country, the state, in order to get citizenship. You know, you'd have to really be a big contributor. And I think what happens here is that the lack of upskilling in the community has made them less viable for necessity of citizenship. Now, older people who are going into retirement and taking their IRAs and their 401ks with them, that makes a lot of sense that they would get citizenship because they're going to retire there. All right. Jump to the next item on the docket. Oh, who's in the back chat? All right, this is from Yahoo Finance. Bermuda is planning a comprehensive crypto ecosystem. expand this out. And what must have been a drastic change for Dennis Pitcher, chief fintech advisor to the premier of Bermuda, he and CoinDesk, Michael Casey, took to the chilly streets of Davos to talk about his government's step to enable blockchain adoption in the island nation. In the summer of 2018, we launched a comprehensive regulatory framework to provide clarity and leverage, said Pitcher. We introduced a principle-based framework that allowed us to define more of a scope around a business plan as opposed to scientific activities. That allows you to have the flexibility to focus on managing risk of what's new in this space. Pitcher hopes to create a system that allows Bermudans to spend the digital currency they receive on government services, and in doing so, building a bridge to overseas economies. This is a game changer. Let me read this again. Pitcher hopes to create a system that allows Bermudans to spend the digital currency they receive on government services, and in so doing, build a bridge to overseas economies. This is really something. By allowing the government to accept it, it provides an opportunity for merchants to start saying, well, I can look at accepting digital dollars, he said. So taxi operators, tourism operators, commercial businesses have a place to actually spend, which means that you're not going to have to fall back to the traditional financial system. Pitcher hopes these systems will finally introduce ordinary Bermudans into the global financial ecosystem. Our history allows us to really understand financial services, he said. But the challenge that comes from that is that when it comes to financial access to financial services, Bermudans are largely excluded. We don't have access to PayPal, Revolt, or Revolut, or Square. And in order to actually get access to the Apple App Store, we buy credit or gift cards. We're too small, he said. Nobody cares about 60,000 people. With the digital currency plan, however, Pitcher believes Bermuda will become more than just a financial product supplier and will eventually turn into a financial powerhouse of its own. So a government-supported mechanism for cryptocurrencies to be applied is actually going to be a game changer. So now it opens up its markets to something more major.
It's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious we're seeing now that the Caribbean island, the Caribbean basin, that's going to be a very strong economic powerhouse.
Yes.
Certainly moving into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Why I say England, on their Brexit move, I don't know how closely or what other kind of relationships that they're building with some of their old Commonwealth, with some of their own Commonwealth states that they had. But if they are actually able to do this Brexit and work well with their former Commonwealths, they might be able to pull this thing off as time goes on down the line. They just might. It's just interesting. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I know that's one of the ideas that they had. But we can obviously see that the Caribbean is definitely going to be an economic entity that is going to have to be dealt with seriously.
Yeah, because although the islands are minor in terms of population, they still need access to the global market. And they're right, PayPal, Cash App, all of those sort of Western systems are excluding other people outside of the United States. And so you don't have access to many things. When I was over on the continent a few weeks ago, the only thing that saved me was Cash App. I was able to use that to send that money to the embassy, and the embassy brought me the money. Other than that, I did not have access to local markets. I did not have access to, you had access to Western Union, but there was so much red tape with dealing with Western Union at the time. It would have been cost prohibitive to actually do it, and time prohibitive too. So then talk about global integration of the markets. Cryptocurrency is the only real way, and blockchain is the only real way to actually integrate into those markets and get them access. And so I can't wait till this type of stuff takes place.
It just seems like that this is definitely where all this is going, and I'm just looking at what some of these global implications are going to be, geoeconomically and geopolitically as well. But this looks fairly substantial, and once again, Mike, like we say, we've got to be in this thing, man, because we are definitely going to be a big part of it.
Man Friday says Black Westerners have a first world skill level of the healthcare system, construction industry, in the infrastructure and management of a metropolis, which is where they live. So let me kind of take this apart for a second. Black Westerners do have a first world education system or educational achievement, but they don't have the skill set that's necessary for fourth industrialization. So that's where the gap is. There's a skills gap between living in the West and actually the fourth industrialization of skill set necessary to be applicable. So yeah, you have a high school diploma, yeah, you went to a community college, but there's a lot of people who ain't doing shit. And so because of that, fourth industrialization requires that those who are in the West have to upskill. We covered an article about this in December or January that talked about, from the McKinsey report, explicitly talked about the impact of fourth industrialization on African Americans. So especially the men have not upskilled in these areas. That's a big problem. So even though, like you said, that they're educated in the West, that does not translate to them being on the continent, because the structure, the political and regulatory structure here in the West does not necessarily apply over on the continent because they don't have the same framework. And so there's not a one apples to apples comparison. Yeah, you might be able to do some things like read in English, but that's the extent of where your skill set is going to be at, unless you have some other idea, swinging a hammer and banging a nail. That's not really going to be applicable over there. They're talking digital transformation. A lot of African Americans don't have digital transformation skills. Yeah, Mufasa says, with all the money brought into the country, imagine the money that would come in when you have a large diaspora living in your country. Yeah, that would make sense, from a retirement standpoint, but you don't have a whole lot of diasporans. You don't have a whole lot of diasporans bringing a whole lot of money there. They're just not doing it. Man Friday says you're talking from tech. The only thing that matters over there is tech. that's a part of the infrastructure process is tech. A good portion of it, I would say, close to 2/3 of the infrastructure development has to revolve around tech. We'll get to that in a second, though. All right, next item on the docket. Yeah, I'll share my screen real quick. I see somebody's in the waiting room. Let me advance them. Then let me share the screen real quick, and I won't go over this too much. I'm only going to watch the first 5 minutes of this. This is the high-level panel on Africa this week. This happened on the 25th. Let me.
Challenges. To my left, Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. Then we also have the newly re-elected President of Botswana, President Masisi. Let's give them a warm applause and welcome. We're also waiting for the president of Senegal. He's unfortunately stuck in traffic. You should maybe think that was not possible in Davos, but as we know, the safest thing is to walk this small alpine village. As I already mentioned, Africa has huge opportunities. 7 out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world is in Africa. In a few years, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world, and 60% of the population in Africa is under 25 years old. So imagine all the jobs and skills that have to be developed in the years to come. But we also know that the young workforce, entrepreneurial spirit, if you have access to education, if there is financial inclusion, it can also create necessary growth and it can lead to prosperity. But there is also a fact that in Africa, you have pockets where we're very far from being on track on the Sustainable Development Goals. And we know the overall goal by 2030 is to eradicate all extreme poverty. African leaders are taking new steps to also make Africa more competitive. One of them is to establish also a free trade area in Africa. It will be really, really quite remarkable. The combined GDP is more than 2.3 trillion already in Africa and a population of 1.2 billion. So let me start with you, Mr. President. This customs union or the free trade market in Africa, how powerful is it going to be? Is it also a reflection of a new leadership thinking in Africa that trade is more important than aid? And is there such a win-win thinking? And when will we see this? How big will it be? And what are the obstacles?
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be here. But getting right into the subject matter, all you've said about Africa is true. What I would add to it is that we perceive, I mean the leadership of Africa, the people of Africa, we perceive these numbers as opportunities. And we want to turn around whatever challenges are associated with these into opportunities to propel growth and spread wealth and success. There is a new leadership emerging in a number of countries in Africa that have hitherto not been known for some of the stellar works that are being undertaken now. If you look what's happening in Ethiopia with President Abiy, and by extension, his influence in the region, you know, the peace deal he had with Eritrea and the net benefits that we derive out of that. We all hope that it would spread to Somalia and the Horn of Africa, and the peace dividend would yield the growth that we want. Africa, not only is it a young, vibrant continent, it's the repository of most of the world's resources, natural resources. And those need to be exploited responsibly and with the prime intention of having the Africans benefit out of those. So there's some level of responsibility that we'd expect from venture capitalists who want to make a return on their investment in such countries. Clearly, when you look at the fact that 60% of our population is under 25 years old and generally fairly well educated or educated enough to be retooled and retrained, with digitization going the rate it's going and the governance ecosystems that support it, wow, this continent potentially presents the most powerful workforce there's been in our lifetime. And so if we take a very optimistic look at that, we feel a certain sense of urgency in coming to WEF and engaging with those who have the where and the means to help us unlock this wealth so we realize our global goals in this stated in the SDGs, including our continental goals stated in Agenda 2030. So I'm here to confirm, though I'm President of Botswana, on behalf of the other African countries, including President Macky Sall, were here. We subscribe to the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we have full confidence that when we increase the intra-Africa trade, it will be a means by which we grow and reach the world. In the same way, we also want the world to reach us. So trade would be a means by which we grow our wealth and we improve the lot of our people.
Thank you. Thank you. That was, I think, clear visions for Africa, also for your country that is one of the most successful ones when it comes to the economy coming back to that. Queen Maxima and...
All right, so I'm not gonna play this whole thing, but the idea here was to actually give you a synopsis on what was going on this week at Davos with the high-level panel on Africa. And I just want to give a quick backdrop because it's an hour long, but I only gave you the first 10 minutes or so. 7 of the 10 fastest growing markets is on the continent of Africa. Africa has almost doubled the amount of connected people to financial services from 23 to 43% between 2011 and 2018. That's very, very, very fast. That's more than African Americans in America. Most of this has been done via mobile banking. So they're talking about using smartphones, dumb phones to connect to banking services, financial services. Microfinance increases agency. We talk about agency a lot on here. And so getting people connected to these microfinance and technologies, micro technologies actually increases the GDP of the continent. 4G coverage is around less than 10% right now. It's supposed to explode later. 25% of Africa uses mobile internet. So 1 in every 4 Africans are using some form of 3G, 4G service for connecting to the internet. 44% of people have mobile internet service. So if for people who want to connect to the internet, almost half of them have to use a mobile device. 1 billion people, out of 1 billion people, half of these people don't have an ID. So identification is really key here. Many African governments struggle with identification. I think that there's supposed to be an AU passport that's supposed to come out. It's supposed to come out by December of 2020. Who knows if they're going to reach their goal on that? One of their top 10 sustainable development goals, SDG. Botswana, you just saw the president there. Botswana is progressing with a national broadband strategy, and the fiber optical network is wrapped around the whole entire country. So they're pretty much laying down the infrastructure now and are focusing on actually connecting people now. So government is talking about building apps, developing apps and lowering the cost of the connectivity. So making sure that people have access to high-speed internet at low cost, kind of like Singapore and South Korea. So in that discussion, the Botswana president says he acknowledges that there's problems in the rural areas of stability, but they're working on that. So I was asked the other day by Gabe A that did I go to the villages in Rwanda, and most African governments are working on improving those areas. like this, the Davos was just talking about. Mobile money-based insurance has increased their income per capita by 60%. So the ability to use their cell phone to connect to financial services, micro financial services, has allowed their income to shoot up 60%. So mobile money taking place by 2025 is a financial inclusion. So there is a objective to get to leverage mobile finance to allow people to connect to these financial services through mobile by 2025, a good portion of them. So more than 43%. Digital infrastructure for financial inclusion. So cloud computing, edge computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of these things come into play when it comes into digital infrastructure and digital transformation. That's what they're talking about. All right. We got Mufasa on the panel, man. What's going on?
Hey, peace, man. What's up?
Sean, bro.
No. I was calling really the citizenship thing was where you were losing me.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, my question to you before we get to like the logical side, the moral and emotional element of us, do you think we deserve citizenship, given how we left?
I don't. How you left? If you were born in the West, you were born in the West. You didn't leave from anywhere.
Well, how we were sold out of Africa. So we were.
I think there is room to have a discussion about transformative resolutions on that type of stuff. But when it comes to that discussion, there's nobody you can really hold accountable, because the states that exist now did not exist back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there was no such thing as a South Africa back then. South Africa didn't come until later. So who can you hold accountable other than the tribes itself? And those tribe members are long gone. So
that's what I tell people when it comes to when people bring up reparations. That's my argument. But when you want to talk about who is responsible for selling us, then we can trace the tribal and the ethnic groups who did these things. Those people are still there, regardless of the state flag that they fly.
Yeah, but they're not 240 years old, right?
The people are not 240 years old. No, the individuals here, no, they're not 240 years old, but they are still the same group of people who did sell us out.
But see, the argument, there's a lot of feedback coming from Complex. The argument here is that if you're going to hold Africans accountable, then you first have to hold Americans accountable, because they're the ones who benefit most, right? There's nowhere on the continent that you can see that there's urbanization and empire building from slavery. There's nothing there to really determine where all that money went or where the compensation went or anything like that. Here you can see urbanization, development, Washington, D.C., all of your railroad infrastructure and everything being developed by those descendants of slaves, right? So
yeah,
it's easy to trace back who is accountable here, like Georgetown University, those institutions, Aetna Insurance, and those places. You can trace back there, but when it comes to the continent, I find it dubious to actually keep going after tribes people that we really don't. They probably don't have a connection to all the information either, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, I think so again, when we take it into a reparations and hold accountable financially discussion, I agree with everything that you said. That's what I tell people. I'm like, well, who are you going to trace down, and then what did they really make from it? Because most people didn't make anything from that situation.
Right.
But I think giving citizenship and asking, allowing people to return home as citizens is different than a monetary accountability argument. That's a lineage argument and a heritage argument. And you could have most African countries, if you have one parent who is a Nigerian, you automatically get citizenship. Or not Nigerian, but many countries have that type of policy in their constitution. So if you can understand the heritage argument, you can make an argument for the diaspora.
Yeah,
If that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I think at this point, yeah, the only thing you can do is appeal to the government and say, hey, you know, this is my lineage, this is my DNA, and then that's the extent of it, and to make the case that for citizenship. But to go to Rwanda or Uganda or something like that and say, well, they should,
Kenya,
to demand citizenship, I don't think that's plausible. You know,
no, I think only where you can, only places like Nigeria, Benin, Sierra Leone, different places where you can see there was a lot of people being traded out, and you can pretty much prove it. I'm only speaking West African countries, Angola, areas like that. Those are the only ones. But that was just, I just wanted to know your stance on that, because those are the emotional arguments. Now, before I make my next point, I wanted to know, do you feel that there's a downside on a reason that African governments should be hesitant to allow diasporans in, whether be they Caribbean or American?
To an extent, because they have a very fragile social system. Nothing like the United States. The United States has a pretty strong social system in terms of like services availability and stuff like that. And so adding more people to a system that's already fragile is only going to, at some point, weaken and possibly break it, right? I've heard of some people going over there and you know, with a few $1,000 in their pocket, and then they ended up broke, and they had to come either have somebody wire them some money or have to come back. And so that's a part of the fragility that I'm speaking of. That, you know, it's not an apples to apples thing to actually go from one to the other. I think that there needs to be some careful examination of what the agenda is to go there. If you're going there for retirement, you know, you saved up $100,000, $200,000 in retirement, it makes sense to go there and spend the rest of your life there. You still have, especially if you're 55, 60 years old, you still have a long life left over there. You'll probably live to be about 85, 90 years old over there. So I think that there needs to be careful examination of that whole entire process. Far too often it's romanticized that people who go over there, man, you know, are just doing fairly well. Not saying that people don't do well, but there's a romanticization that goes on, you know, that you just go over there, touch down, and then everything's good. So
yeah, I think there's a lot. Okay, so there's a lot of people who there's some people who may go over there and fail and, you know, lose money and not do things, but then there are people who are bringing money and actually hiring people and doing business over there. And my thing is, how is it hurting the government for those people who go there and things don't pan out the way that they wanted them to pan out? It's not, they're not getting any type of government funding or aid. I mean, I don't understand how this is hurting them. Like, even if there's some people, and I don't know the data on how many people succeed and fail. I would think that more people were succeeding, but I don't have any data or proof on that. But I just don't see how this is really hurting them, because I see more of an upside. I'm seeing if you go over there, right, just for one, we could just look at the year of return alone. Just the year of return alone and the tourism dollars that they're able to get. Now, imagine when it goes beyond just tourism, and then you have familial connections, you have more people not only familiar with it, but having more people connected to it. So that's even more money pouring in from the diaspora, just from tourism alone. I don't see how any way that this thing really hurts. And then whenever we bring this up, people bring up the kind of floodgate mentality, like, oh, what if everyone comes in? But people are not interested in that right now. Like, if we, right now, Black people are not trying to go, they're not interested in that right now. So
yeah, right now they're not, but at some point, if the market starts to shift, and like the Davos Forum is talking about 10 years from now, you will see an influx. And what do you do with an influx? We saw what happened in the United States when an influx of Latinos came into the country. It really started to weigh down the system pretty quickly.
But look how we accept in immigrants in this country. They are able to drain a lot of resources. you're not you can't drain a bunch of resources in African systems the way that they're set up. They don't have so many social programs.
Well,
So
when the draining of the systems here is so here the way how it works is that state governments get federal assistance based on the number of participants on the system. And so when they bring in all of these people into the system, it eventually weighs it down locally. And so you have less housing, less access to housing, increase in staples, or decrease in staples, because there's more mouths that need to be fed, and public infrastructure access. So schools, kids go to more of these schools locally, and so seat availability becomes a problem. Those are the sort of resource provisions that start to get weighed down. On the continent, what I'm referring to is that they only have so many services available just for their people, and currently. So in Kigali, when I was there, it's 1 million people there. That's the systems that they have there is still not even sustainable for the people that they do have. So you take another 5, 10, 20,000 people, that stuff starts to weigh down the system really quickly if something was to happen, right? So you take a coronavirus outbreak or some other viral outbreak, yeah, you're gonna have a problem because the system was only set up for the people that were there, not for the additional.
Okay, so when you mention America, you're talking a lot of public systems. The schools get weighed down. These are all public things. And even when you're saying that the federal, basically people are applying these numbers to boost their numbers to get more federal funding. You're talking, this is more entitlement spending. This is more public assistance in some type of way. And when you talk Africa, you just don't have that. And that's why I'm just like, okay, so now I understand what you're saying as far as food, but I mean, we could solve that by making sure that people can, we can make sure as you come in to get your citizenship, you have a certain amount of resources and planning before you come. You understand what I mean? I think if we set it up in that way, where you're not jumping through a million hoops and waiting years like you're doing in Ghana, but you have enough to where you're not a bane on the system. And then, like I said, you can't drain the system in African countries the way you can drain the system in America.
Well, not drain it, but you would actually put pressure on it.
You would put pressure. But as far as what, like healthcare, but see,
healthcare is very important because if you don't, if they can't account for your conditions. For example, Black people, especially Black men, tend to have type 2 diabetes at a high rate. Their systems may not even be equipped for that because they don't have a diabetic issue over there, right?
But is that your problem or the country's problem?
It's a both. It's a both. There need to be services provision for your conditions, and your conditions are exceed the what the system's capabilities can output.
Well, let me ask you. So you're saying you like the idea of people retiring there. The higher your age, the more the health issues. So why would you be okay with that and not okay with just general citizenship? Because you're inviting older people more. That's more diabetes.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. People who tend to have retirement and things like that saved up, those people tend to be more healthy anyways. Right? So they were working all these years. They had pretty good health care. They were pretty well taken care of. If we're just talking about taking poor people who are on welfare here and then dropping them off at 65, it's not really a good idea to do that because their systems are not equipped for, that sort of.
And not to cut you off, that's where I'm not really very worried because there's barriers to moving to Africa. Now, if we were talking about, giving people money to do it or some type of stipends or, some type of programs where people were just able to go for free, then I can understand. But most of the people I know can't even afford a $4,000 Africa trip. You know what I mean? So that barrier alone is gonna filter the people who come over.
Yeah, I think there's room to have discussion about both, but there's an infrastructure issue that needs to be addressed first and foremost. Dr. Phoenix and myself have talked about building infrastructure development in terms of healthcare is actually going to be really key in how Africans increase their survivability.
Okay.
Man Friday was trying to talk. Go ahead, Man Friday.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Pleasure to be on the panel. Long time listener. I want to respond to something that engineering was saying in the chat, me and him having a discussion. And also, you might be, we're talking about tech in the African continent. And my point was that we're dealing with apps and technologies for mobile phones and devices and stuff like that. Those things are the future, and it's definitely gonna be more relevant over the next coming decades. My concern is that the infrastructure as it stands on the continent at the moment is not really ready to capitalize on those developments in technology at the moment. I was speaking about doctors and nurses. I was speaking about as in this country, a lot of the black people, we work in construction, we work in the subways, we work in the hospitals and stuff like that. So I was making the point to engineering that I feel that if the black Westerners or the diasporians were in Africa, that it would help the society in general to kind of like escalate its progress, because I feel as though there's a gap between the drive that there is to get into tech and what the actual people are experiencing on the ground. I've been to the continent myself. I was in Ghana last year, the year before, for a couple of weeks, and I got a chance to look. I went even out into the villages and stuff like that. So I know that the majority of the African continent is not living in the municipality. They're not living in the metropolis. You know, and if you forget about those people, that doesn't really make any sense, because that's the majority of the people. So I kind of feel that black diasporians need to kind of like be engaged by the governments in those countries to kind of like help to build up the nation, but they need some incentive as well. And I think that they would do well to look at us and our skills, kind of like integrate that with them. And then after that, we'd be at a competitive level, kind of like with the Western powers. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's a really good idea and perception, because if listening to the the Botswana president just now in Davos talked about that. If you watch the whole entire thing, he talks about that later, about the people in the villages and the people in the rural areas. The game plan to actually get them over there. There's another article we read earlier that talked about the influx of people going into the urban centers coming from the rural areas. And so you're going to see a shift anyways as the jobs start to populate in the urban centers because of the human capital need. And so people are going to start to move because they are in need of work, and then the urban centers are going to be
100%
in demand for the human capital too, so that which lowers the wages, right? So there's a two-tier factor to all of this, and I think what you're saying is true, and it does have some merit. But what's happening from what I've seen over there recently is that you need some form of market drivers over there, and I think you're right that Black people coming from the West can drive those markets, but the markets that they're talking about that need to be driven is beyond the civil infrastructure, it's the digital infrastructure. So
that's right.
So that part is where ADOS or people in the diaspora have to upskill and keep up. They're not really able to do it. They're not actually bringing anything there if they don't have that skill set.
I hear what you're saying, but I hear what you're saying, but I wouldn't agree that they don't bring anything to the table, and they don't bring anything there, because the stuff
just fourth industrialized skills is what's necessary right now. That's like really, 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 really key right now. So the ability to get rid of paper, physical paper for healthcare, and move to a more digital practice a more digital transformed system is really, really key right now. Because
100%.
if you can take all of those hospitals and the need to build out all of these clinics so that people don't have to come to a hospital, so you can lower the cost, that all that stuff needs to be digitized, and no one has really come up with a sustainable solution as of yet. And so I think people coming from the West, the diasporans, can provide that if they have that skill set. So that's just one area I'm referring to. Go ahead.
Yeah, they can, and I think they should. But when you look at how people from outside Africa view Africa, I'm talking about the Western governments and investors, they're always looking for, they're looking in terms of agriculture and resources, minerals and stuff like that. That's what they see as a breadbasket of the world. That's what they're looking at. So when they approach these African countries like China, like I mentioned earlier in the chat, they're just looking to find some way to extract resources.
Mm-hmm.
They would, and also they would like to use what's the word I'm looking for? They would like to kind of like the customer. They would like to the customer base. They would like to have the customer base of the Africans, but at the moment they're not ready to harvest the customer base because the people on the ground don't have the. I don't know how many people have smartphones. I don't know how many people have access to the internet. They don't know have access to electricity. They don't know have access to mobile devices or laptops and stuff like that. So overloading on the tech end, I think will make most of the people like not be able to be on that playing field. I think first of all, you have to do the infrastructure, not the infrastructure, but you have to first come up in stages. For example, if you've got the roads and you've got the street lights, then you've got the street lights for the pavement. Once you have the infrastructure, then you can have an app on your phone to kind of get some food delivered or whatever. And those things run a lot smoother. Or you can have an app to find out what time the train is coming, as we do over here in this country. But if you don't have those basic things running first, going into the app side of things is kind of redundant if you haven't got, your base on the ground sorted out first. My worry, gone.
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, you're right, that, physical civil infrastructure needs to be laid down first, but they both have to be laid down in tandem. So, for example, we're not talking about building apps so people can buy food, but building apps so that they have access to global financial markets or intercontinental markets, or access to proper nursing and healthcare, or access to government services such as passports and health insurance and things of that nature. Accountabilities, right? So here we have in the States, we have at least our city in Boston, we have a government app. So we can use our app to take pictures of infrastructure for assistance from the government itself, take pictures of land to get an idea of who owns the land deeds and things of that nature. All of that comes from the app now. So those sort of government services are being provided via the app, but you don't need roads and highways for that. You don't need trains for that.
100%. Yeah, I'm not anti the apps. I'm not anti or anything like that. I'm just making a point. For example, I work in construction, yeah, and I see the tall buildings going up on the continent, and I know from working in this country that when you even want to clean the windows on those tall buildings, you need window cleaners who have can abseil down the side of the building. The Africans of the continent, they don't have that skill set yet. And if they don't have the skill set, that they're not even going to have to be able to maintain the structures and the stuff that they're building. We need to be on that level first. Be able to be self-sufficiency in all the things that we do. Otherwise, we're going to be, not we ourselves, otherwise Africans always going to be beholden to Western companies to come and do the stuff for them what they should be able to do for themselves.
No, but I think you can leapfrog a lot of that skill, right? So before you would have just used a human, you would have just used human capital to clean those windows, like you said. That's actually a good point. But you have drones now that can do all of that.
I don't know, possibly.
No, you have drones. I was there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
okay.
I was at the drone expo in Africa. And they have these big, massive drones that can do all of what you're talking about.
Wow.
Literally do all that what you're talking about. I mean, drones the size of half the size of a car. It has the ability to lift 60 pounds. So you imagine a drone that can that has AI built into it and 5G and 4G built into it, you give it a set of instructions for the building itself. You upload the plans, the building infrastructure plans to the drone itself, and it understands where the windows are. Leave it to its own devices. It can run for 2 hours, 3 hours.
That's excellent. If you can do that, that's excellent. As long as the continent is not importing, importing skills and services that it can't do for itself. It needs to be able to do them for themselves. And I think that the point I was making is that, diasporians could go in and do that. Not that they necessarily have to be in tech, but because we work in and live in the metropolis, there's lots of things and lots of skill sets we can do to help on the ground, not just tech, because most of the people are not on the tech level yet. That's my feeling.
Right. That's what they were saying just now in Davos, right? I played the video. That there's a necessity, like the Botswanan president said, that 60% of their people literacy rate is actually doable for productivity, but they need to upskill in these areas. And that's what they're talking about. If you look at this title right here on The Guardian, it says African Development Bank wants Nigeria to lead in unlocking fourth industrial revolution potential in Africa. So those are the discussions that they're having that is necessary for productivity right now. So that's why I brought that up, because this is huge shift that the United States isn't even caught up with all of this yet. There's still, like, for example, I needed to go get a passport card today, and I was not able to get it, and I have to wait until next week to get it. And the process is so complicated. It took me like 20 minutes just to schedule an appointment. It's just ridiculous. Like, really it's just really long in the tooth when it comes to technical development from a governance standpoint. And I think that African governments have the ability now to leverage all that technology and to put all of this stuff on a blockchain in order to get in their people identified, right? So IDs are a big problem. 900, something like 500, 600 million people don't have IDs. Well, in order for these people to open up a bank account, need an ID. All of this stuff can take place with digital transformation, and that's what's been discussed when I was over there a few weeks ago. So let me read this article real quick, and then we'll get back to some dialogue. All right, this one is from The Guardian. The African Development Bank has said that the common fourth industrial revolution has the potential to transform Africa's economy, increase its productivity, and enhance its global trade. We just got finished talking about that. In doing this, African Development Bank said this would dramatically improve the well-being of African citizens and make them more competitive. African Development Bank, and it's unlocking the potential of the fourth industrial revolution of Africa study with focus on Nigeria, Cameroon, Morocco, Africa, and Uganda. I'm not sure why they put Africa there. Believe that these countries, especially in Nigeria, represent the different combination of strengths and weaknesses that African countries possess. The fourth industrial revolution represents a fundamental change in the way people live, work, and relate to one another. It is a new chapter in human development enabled by extraordinary technology advances commensurate with those of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. These advances are merging the physical, digital, and biological worlds in ways that create both huge promise and potential peril. According to the Regional Development Bank, in the past, Africa was unable to benefit and capitalize on the opportunities brought about by previous industrial revolutions. It pointed out that this weakened its position in relation to international competitors. In light of the benefits and challenges posed by the fourth industrial revolution, African Development Bank in the report noted that Africa cannot afford to, nor does it have to, miss out on the opportunities brought about by the revolution. According to the African Development Bank, with a growing number of business users and end consumers, the fourth industrial revolution is starting to become a reality in Africa. It pointed out that studies which dated back to 2015 projected high growth in African startup technological entrepreneurs, identifying 3,500 new technology-related ventures and an anticipated $1 billion in venture capital by 2018. In 2019, it was revealed that reality has surpassed projections, and approximately 6,500 technology startups were identified on the continent, among which about 10% develop fourth industrial revolution applications, 712 startups. They received $210 million in venture capital investments of the overall $2.27 billion investments in technology startups. However, AFDB noted that not all these startups by any means are focused on fourth industrial revolution. Many are in the realm of digitization. But the basis for Africa's growth into fourth industrial revolution is already there. On the supply side, the report noted that Africa cannot, as of today, be characterized as a producer of fourth industrial revolution technologies, but rather as an adopter of existing technologies produced and developed elsewhere in the world. These products and services are often developed by foreign corporations or startups, but also by African corporations or startups to meet African demand. It stressed that Africa's large population, which is expected to double by 2050 to 2.4 billion people, presents both a source of data to feed innovation in fourth industrial revolution technologies, as well as a dormant valuable market. According to the present analysis, there is margin for growth on the supply side as proposed products and services in Africa stand way below estimated demand levels. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just highlighting the fact that the African Development Bank is focusing on Nigeria. And somebody asked me the other day about Nigeria. What roles do African countries play from a top 10 perspective in terms of development? And I said that Nigeria would be number one for this year coming out the gate. And this article is kind of highlighting that the AFDB wants Nigeria to lead the unlocking of the fourth industrial revolution potential in Africa. So I was pretty much on the money, because what I saw on the ground at the event, there was a swarm of Nigerian startups all over the place. I mean, they took up the majority of startups in the room. And they had some really, really game-changing ideas with their startups. So I'm not surprised that, the AFDB is looking to Nigeria to lead in that area. Any thoughts from anybody on it?
Nothing.
Yeah, Nigeria is always, they're very in the UK. They're very business minded. They have a lot of startups, and it's no surprise that they're going to want to be leading in Africa. They're the largest population of Black people in the world, isn't it, Nigeria? So
yeah. All right, this is from Quartz.com. Africa will have some of the world's fastest growing economies in 2019 and a looming debt crisis. So I think we covered this earlier. I just wanted to put a little bit more emphasis behind it. So trying to get grips with what to expect from Africa's economies in 2019 can be broken out into three categories of discussion: the good, the underwhelming, and the disconcerting. The good news is that in 2019, like in 2018, Sub-Saharan Africa will be home to several of the world's fastest growing economies, according to the IMF. The region's growth numbers will be led again by Ethiopia, Rwanda, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Benin, Kenya, Uganda, and Burkina Faso, who remain in the top 10. Tanzania joins that group this year, replacing Guinea. The region is expected to have overall economic growth of 3.8%, on par with the global forecast of 3.7%. That growth is driven by the steady rebound of commodity prices and improvement in the global economy, improved capital market access after several of the countries made valiant attempts to get their fiscal books in order following the commodity price slump of 2014-2015. But those numbers would be better were it not for the underwhelming projections from the continent's big two, Nigeria and South Africa. Both are recovering from a pretty tough 2018, and both have presidential elections this year. This was last year, so keep that in mind. Nigeria is expected to see an expansion of 2.3% better, but not much than the 1.9% of 2018. South Africa will expand by 1.4%, which is again an improvement on 0.8% last year, but nothing to cheer about. As Washington, D.C. think tank Brookings notes in this year's Foresight Africa report, that kind of growth doesn't look great up against 2.5% annual population growth. If you leave out Big Two and Angola, aggregate growth for Sub-Saharan Africa rises to 5.7% for 2019. About half of the world's fastest growing economies will be located on the continent, with 20 economies expanding at an average rate of 5% or higher over the next 5 years, faster than 3.6% rate for the global economy, right? Raima, director of Brookings Growth Initiative. So here is a list of those top countries. And we went over that earlier. The only difference here is that Tanzania has been added. But like the article says, half of the world's fastest growing economies will be located on the continent. Early this week, somebody said that basically that Africa does not have any growth. It's not a growth vertical. Okay, this is not true, and we have to be careful that when we hear some of these statements being made at the off the cuff, that these are inaccurate statements. You know, this is misinformation being spread throughout the manosphere that African markets are not high growth markets. That's not true. Half of your fastest growing markets are coming off of the continent. How can that be the case? Especially these are all melanated countries. These are not, this is not the North, connected with the Middle East. These are actually sub-Saharan countries. So how can this be the case? Anybody have any thoughts on what's been said? It's the last item on the docket.
No thoughts, really just questions. I hear you speak on tech. When they're saying this growth, is this gonna be specifically on tech, or do you feel like there's opportunities in all different areas in these countries?
No, all different areas. All different areas. Agriculture is going to be big, but the way that agriculture is being played out here is through what we call agri-tech. So they're talking about leveraging the tech with the classic agriculture to advance it and get it faster to the market and get better return on investment. That's going to be really key. We talked about hemp and cannabis. These are going to be really key drivers because the European market needs it, because Europe can't grow hemp and cannabis in the same way that the sub-Saharan Africa can. And so you're talking about a $5, $6, $7, $8 billion market that's all to ourselves.
Now, so retail experiences pretty much doesn't do you any good with an emerging cannabis market in Africa, right? You'd be better off knowing what cultivation tech, or will retail experience be needed too?
No, you need export. Well, retail, if you're going to sell it abroad, but this is mostly to the medical industry, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so they're going to pay big dividends behind it, especially if you can get the right strain.
So you're saying the medical? Okay, all right. I'm just trying to feel my way through this because I'm not sure what to do. I just know I want to go there. I know I'm saving up money, and I'm trying to figure out which way, because I do have some knowledge on cannabis, but I don't have anything tech focused. So I'm thinking maybe I should just start to study and do some things, because it doesn't seem like knowing retail is really gonna, get you far.
Well, we have a cannabis hangout we do twice a month, man. You go through the archives and check out the last ones we did. Complex actually leads a lot of that type of stuff. He is the aficionado in this area of cannabis cultivation and knowledge. So he kind of leads off that stuff on Sundays that we do. So what I'm saying here is agriculture and tech is really, 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 really big right now. When I was over there at the drone expo, African Drone Expo, and I saw some of the drones that do irrigation and pesticide spreading and things like that, That's
So
that's a huge market.
do we have any competitive advantage with that stuff other than just a strong dollar
In
coming from America?
You have your knowledge. You're the outsider coming in, so you're looking at this whole entire landscape and you're saying there's a lot of opportunity here. So it's up to you in terms of how you apply that, right? When I got there, I saw many opportunities right in the first 30 minutes. I said, this is crazy.
All right, cool.
I see a lot of people doing it. I think what happens here is that people are just trying to survive over there rather than to actually drive a lot of the technology. And the ones who can drive the technology are in different spaces. And so you got to get I tell everybody, in the management, you got to go over there just to see what's going on the ground. It's easy to read these articles, but it's harder to actually apply it from behind the keyboard, right? You got to put boots on the ground and really to understand what's going on.
Agreed. Anybody who hasn't been to the continent and just kind of look from the outside, you don't really know what you're talking about, to be honest with you. You go into the cities, it's pretty much like the Caribbean. You could go to Barbados or Trinidad. The cities are very much the same. But when you go outside of the cities, like into the bush, you're really in Africa there, man. It's a totally different thing. And, you have to understand they've got different needs. It's much more agricultural and
Yeah, but that's where people like you and I come in. And, we leverage some of the tools and stuff like that. Now you have a proprietary African tool that can be used for cultivating crops and things like that.
And they're willing to work with you as well.
Absolutely.
If you just come to them with a plan, they see you as that guy, the money man.
I made 60 connections at that event based on some of the conversations that I was having on stage. So what I'm saying, people were coming up to me saying, hey, I liked everything you were talking about. Here's my business card. Let's talk. All from all across the continent: Cameroon, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, many, Uganda, many people from different parts of the continent who were there would come to shake their hand with me, give me their business card saying, hey, I liked everything you were saying. Let's chop up some game later. Here's my LinkedIn. That's how they were focusing. I didn't get all of this, this sort of a hatred that people say, oh, the Africans they don't like you over there. That's BS.
No. That's not true at all.
Hey, Mike.
Engineering cannabis, what's going on?
I want to answer the question that was asked about the retail cannabis that wasn't answered yesterday.
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
So in terms of the blockchain, what the application of blockchain in the cannabis industry is basically, let's go through the process of the cannabis industry from cultivation to the last place, the dispensary. The communication between the cultivator and the dispensary or the customer is the lab. The lab itself provides results of your crop, basically what's in the crop, what chemical compounds are in the crop and everything. And that's what's communicated. That should be communicated to the customer to basically to show the quality of their crop itself. So the lab itself, that's where the problem is. Because in a lot of news and all that, the lab has problems in basically verifying contamination and all that. So the goal of the blockchain will aid in automating the lab process. So now you're automating the lab process, automating how the results come in, and automatically when the results for, let's say a company who produces a large amount of cannabis, and it goes through the testing, the lab takes that information and automatically encases it into a blockchain. When it's encased in that blockchain, what should happen now? This is just theoretical. What's going to happen is when a customer goes in a dispensary says, hey, we have these products. As well, we have this software app that you need to download that once you scan your product in there, it gives you full information of the quality of product it has from the blockchain perspective. So it cannot be altered, it cannot be changed. And when your customer comes in, he can basically feel confident that he's getting what he's required to get, especially in the medical side, when you're required to get a certain amount of CBD, CGN in a product, you want to have that confidence that once he scans it, this is the amount he gets on that. And that was what that blockchain provides. And it also provides a way to eliminate the black market. So for instance, a customer comes in, he scans it, and he scans a product, and he doesn't see that product on the blockchain. Automatically, that's either that product is not meant to be there, or it's a black market. So automatically now, if with the software, I can ask the customer to allow a location, basically a locator identifier. So immediately that location identifier goes into the blockchain and goes straight to the FDA. And at that point, that eliminates anybody who's trying to basically provide a black market compound into a dispensary cannot do that ever again. Because one, the dispensary is afraid of getting charged by the FDA. Two, you have customer confidence from the app and also from the blockchain that what's going to be given is what's going to be seen. So that's what that blockchain provides. It provides that confidence, that quality control. And also, with the problem, there was a problem with the vaping incident. And the problem was they couldn't trace where the contamination came quickly. But with the blockchain, you can trace every part of it. And if it's not in the system, you cannot sell it. And with that, you eliminate contamination. So that's how the blockchain can basically help in the quality control in the retail side and also in the dispensary side itself.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that clearly. It still sounds more like that's something you could appeal to the government with, to kind of help them.
It has to be implemented in the government too, because right now, okay, for instance, in the federal level, once you implement it in the federal level, now each state is going to basically start transporting cannabis. How do you log in information from the transport of each state's cannabis, basically how they transport each state's cannabis? So for instance, if I'm trying to transport cannabis from California to Arizona, before I reach Arizona, my blockchain information of that cannabis product is already transferred to Arizona and is already secured. And that alone is a good quality control element of it too.
So, okay, but wait, the blockchains would have to be connected. So California and Arizona would have to be on the same system.
That's why I say there's going to be a federal system too.
Yeah, that's what the DC blockchain conference is actually talking about.
Currently, it's only a state system because right now it's still federally legal. Mm-hmm. But once it becomes federal legal, that system has to be adopted if you want to do quality control. That system is that blockchain system is the best quality control system I've seen, and I've looked into it. I've tried everything. Because currently, as example for the vaping, remember that vaping contamination. If they had that quality control, that blockchain, that system, that vaping contamination wouldn't have happened because that quality control will have been there and installed by the blockchain.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I get it. I guess I was thinking more when I'm saying retail. In my mind, I'm thinking, how is it gonna make me more money?
That would make you more money. You're eliminating the black market. You're giving confidence. You're giving confidence to your customers. If your customer says, "Hey, what are you buying out there?" You can kill yourself, but you actually know what you're buying in here. You have the app to look directly and see what concentrations you have. So you're giving confidence to your customer, eliminating the black market. So how is that a win-win in terms of monetary value?
No, it is a win-win. I think I don't think the customers are gonna buy in as much as you're thinking. I don't think they really care. There's a lot of customers who intentionally go to black market because they.
That's what I'm saying. That's why you have to do a two-pronged approach: blockchain and education. Educate your customer that we have a way to basically secure your health based on knowing what's in what you're ingesting. Mm-hmm. Rather than going to a black market and knowing you don't know what you're ingesting and using that vaping technology, a vaping incident as a scenario. So if you use that and sell it, how would if I tell you, hey, if you come here, you will know what you're ingesting. If you go there, you might ingest something and die. How would you be more prone to come where you know you won't die?
It would help. It would help. Like I said, it would help. But you know, I think in California, see now you have a better chance somewhere where it's more new. You know, a lot of Californians, they don't really care about that because they've been smoking weed the same ways for years.
Yeah, but it has to be adopted because right now, again, I'm going to reference that vaping incident where a couple of people died.
Yeah.
Those kind of things will happen if you continue, and especially when it becomes legal. Now more people want to sell weed and more people want to be profit. And profitable means more people want to cut corners. And what does that mean? People will die. So why not keep your mind safely into a more secure product with a blockchain technology infused in it?
Yeah, I mean, we on the same page. I'm agreeing with you. I think, I mean, that in combination with some big money marketing campaigns where you can really get those things out and sell it to the customers and educate. Yeah.
So those are two prone approaches.
Yeah, man, Friday, you have something you want to add?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's actually a really good discussion on engineering cannabis. Thank you for providing all that. Because, you know, there's a lot of avenues that can go about this. I mean, I know you're Nigerian, right? Engineering cannabis?
Yeah, there are a lot of avenues. The application of blockchain and AI, we've discussed on it. We've discussed on basically natural disasters. We've discussed on insurance. Even within the natural disasters, I have like a whiteboard where I have 15 ideas within the natural disasters where you can apply blockchain for insurance companies, for construction companies. The application is so endless that if you go in deeper, and there's a lot of profit to be made. Mm-hmm. So the application of blockchain, AI, IoT, if you go into it deeply, I mean, the application is endless, from fintech to energy conservation. For instance, even energy monitoring system. There's a lot you can do with basically blockchain, AI, and all that. And it's impressive. Even in cultivation, I haven't talked of cultivation of cannabis. Right now, we have problems with dosage of cannabis, cultivation of cannabis, how you can automate cannabis cultivation by using blockchain, AI, and IoT. How you can use, again, dosage recommendations for cannabis, it doesn't exist. But with enough records, you can use AI and create an algorithm to know your proper dosage for individuals who are coming in a different weight, size, age. So the application, if you study it well, the application is endless. I mean, there's a lot, even security. We even talked of security. And with the ideas of Nagon they gave me, I even have ideas on how to employ security and how to sell it. So when you start coding it and seeing the applications, I have a whiteboard full of where I can tell you, any industry, I can tell you how you apply it, detail, and how you apply it from the beginning to the end. So the application is endless.
Yeah, because the application of cannabis now in terms of medicine for opioid addiction is really, really an explosive market.
Yeah. And the question is now, the study, even with the opioid, what dosage, because right now, when I started studying the pharmacology of cannabis, you have to find the right amount. You can either underuse or overuse. And even then, if you overuse, it's not going to cure your pain. It's going to exacerbate the pain. If you underuse, it's going to exacerbate the pain. You have to find that sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you, what do you think when this emerges on the continent? What do you think is the best sector of the cannabis industry to be in is going to be?
I'm a proponent of tech. I'm a proponent of tech and cannabis. The infusion of tech and cannabis. I believe the cultivation, like everything else, cultivation and all that, is going to grow. But at the end, if you look at history and you look at how the alcohol industry got started, The winners were not people who grew corn or ethanol. People who won were the people who had brands. And the same thing is going to apply in the cannabis industry. The people who will win are not the cultivators. The people who will win are individuals who can brand that compound and also sell it well. And
But how are you getting that from tech? Wouldn't you want to be in retail, sales, marketing?
Tech,
like be like the Nike of weed?
What do you think tech is in terms of marketing, data analysis and all that? I can pinpoint your customers just by using tech. That's the problem. People are removing tech from marketing. Tech and marketing are evolving hand in hand.
So, but when I'm thinking tech, so what am I misunderstanding? Because when I'm thinking tech as a more B2B aspect of the business. I'm not thinking everywhere. Tech as Google. Tech. What are you marketing though? You're saying branding, Google, right? Go ahead, Google, I'm listening.
Google is using tech to basically, okay, let me say the biggest company, bigger than Google, is Uber. Uber has your information on location, information on what you eat and Uber Eats, and they even had credit cards. So they have every information about you. So if they want to know where you go in the next 7 days, they can find that. If they want to know what you eat in the next 7 days and pinpoint how to advertise for you in the next 7 days, what you will eat, they can do that. So I have that information. So if I say on Tuesday, I see your data. On Tuesday, you eat French food, Chinese food every Tuesday. What do you think I'm going to pop up on your phone on Tuesday? The nearest restaurants for you, and also the nearest Uber you can take to go to that restaurant. Right. So that is marketing. That is what tech does.
Okay, I think I'm misunderstanding the alcohol analogy then. So you're thinking companies like Ease or some of these different companies who are trying to do the Uber of delivery, that type of deal. People who have the technical features to allow you to purchase.
No, pinpointing the customers is going to be the most important aspect. Right?
Pinpointing what your customer needs before he even knows it. That's the important part.
Yeah, data analytics, right? So everybody has their GPS location on their phone and they're sharing all this data in real time. Somebody like those data.
Everybody's an algorithm right now. Everybody in this world right now, once you have a cell phone, you're an algorithm. And the more data I get from you, the better I make the algorithm better. Your data, your resources, your data. So if I get enough data on you, I can predict what you want on Tuesday and on Wednesday, and I can advertise it on you, and you will buy it.
So I mean, but where is our opportunity of entry with that though? I mean, the things you guys are mentioning are pretty much on lock.
Where's the opportunity? Remember.
No, an opportunity to gather that level of data. Opportunity to gather that level of data.
In Africa, that's what they're doing right now. You're trying to gather that kind of data every day. In a country that's growing, your goal is there to try to figure out what that community is going to need before they even realize they need it. So your goal is to gather every information. If they need cannabis, you should be able to know what type of strain they need before. Or your goal is to gather enough data to make to basically. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say that's exactly the conversation that they were having. They had this digital business officer over on at the event, and she's from Coca-Cola, and she's talking about exactly what you're doing, how Coca-Cola leverages all of this big data to drive customers.
That's it. If Coca-Cola is going to infuse cannabis in their product, don't you think Coca-Cola wants to know where their market share is going to be? How their market share is going to go increase? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're just going to sit down and wait?
No, they're actively going out on the continent.
I mean, when I think data, right? When I think data, I'm thinking about. So you got the software companies who people are using to sell their products. They got a ton of data. You have data companies like BDS Analytics. I don't know if you know about them.
I know BDS.
Yeah, so basically they're infused into people's POS systems to get it. Go ahead, I'm listening.
Data is beyond what you're limiting data. Data is so powerful, you need to think beyond that. I can use data to automate a whole cultivation system. You know you can do that, right? Where only one person can run a whole cultivation system by using data. You know you can do that, right?
Okay, yeah, using data, but what data? Like data on consumers?
Data cultivation system. You don't need data on consumers.
So you're saying you just take the data
I
from people who
I
are
go
running
in
them,
there
and
and
then you
look.
could run the whole thing.
If I go there and talk to a master grower, I can get a data on how the grower strain and automate that whole system and grow that strain every single time in efficiency. That's just one part of it. I can use data for security reasons. Now, security is driven. What is security driven by? It's driven by fear of the unknown. People get security because they don't know what's going to happen. Well, what if security is driven by data? Data of your environment. Anything that happens in your environment, your security basically becomes alert. What if that's what's going to drive it? So these are the ways you need to be thinking about how to imply data. If Google and Chick-fil-A is doing that, why shouldn't you, a small business or anybody, be thinking of how to imply it that way? So that's the way everybody should be thinking of employing. In the same way they employ data, the way big companies are doing, you should be thinking of a way to employ that same data and basically make it more profitable. Data is the new oil. I've seen how applicable it is. So you just need to know how to utilize it. I've talked about how to utilize it in dispensary just by using a blockchain system, eliminate your competition. So why can't you use that in any other industry?
Yeah, it's the same blueprint. It's the same blueprint across the board. You're just applying it in different applications. So it's one of those things where Africans generate a lot of data because there's 1 billion people on there on the continent, and it's just so much data that's just generated. And that's the whole purpose of that discussion was, one, how do you secure that data? Because there's a lot of data that's just moving around in these big tech colonizers, Facebook and Google. They want access to that data, but they're getting it at the cheapest price, which is free. Well,
and Google, to your point, Google just invested $10 billion in the U.S. betting on the U.S. economy to create 11 data centers. They are creating 11 data centers around the United States to capture all the United States individuals in the United States data. Why is that so important to invest $10 billion? Because they know the profit margin would be 10 times that $10 billion once they capture that data. So they know what it is. And I've seen how powerful it is. I've seen how powerful.
Let me ask you this, Mike. What stops African nations from basically doing what the Chinese do, of just creating their own versions of all of these different things and getting all that information themselves?
Because Africa is made up of 55 different countries, and China is just one country. They have a very
that's what I thought. They
have a very strong technocratic system in place, whereas Africa does not have that as yet.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
One thing I
noticed.
noticed.
Cool. I got a phone call. I'm listening though.
Okay, go ahead, bro.
Yeah, one thing I noticed when I was in Ghana with the Chinese, they don't mix. They're not big mixers. They had their own, like, I want to say towns, but their own living spaces. They imported their own women, and they didn't really interact, to be honest with you, other than just for the work that they were doing.
Yeah.
So they're very much their own set. Everything is Chinese. They get their Chinese machines in, because I was over there, the big construction project as well. They get their own machines in. They have their own women in, and they kind of, everybody else, the surrounding, I don't know what you want to call them, native population, but they kind of like service them, try their best way to service them with what they can. But China do for self 100%.
Yeah, they've been locked out of those markets, and I think that's supposed to change, in the next, year and a half or something like that. I've heard of those discussions happening, and they've been deporting, contrary to the popular belief in the manosphere that, Chinese men are just knocking up these women and stuff like that and beating people up. That's not happening. They're deporting those people almost immediately. No different in the United States when they, deport, a person from Latin America back to their country. And so,
well, they do that as long as they don't have too much economic leverage. I think in northern Nigeria they made some Chinese guy a chief. Did you hear about that last year?
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah. So basically, in one of those like northern Nigeria, like the Arab place, not Arab places, the Muslim places, they made the guy kind of like, it's kind of like a mayor of his zone, and they did it basically, you know, to have the Chinese on board in that region, you know, and when they're dealing with the African populations, they they don't have a situation of like mentorship of showing the Africans how to build the rails or how to build the roads or whatever they're doing. They just lock them out, provide them with the service, and then say, pay me, or if you don't pay me, then, you know, what resources have you got to bargain with me? I think it would be a better exchange if, you know, or it really should be the case that every time that you go into a relationship, a business relationship with China or with anybody, you know, there needs to be some kind of exchange of knowledge. The knowledge-based exchange doesn't happen. They keep them locked
knowledge
out.
transfer.
Yeah, the knowledge transfer. They keep them locked out, which then keeps them totally beholden to these foreign powers. And you know that if that continues, nothing's going to change.
Well, that's what I said when I was over there. You know, if they want to do business here, then it has to be a technological transfer. Because the United States and the West wants to do business in China, they have to transfer their technology too. So Africans would benefit greatly if there's a technological transfer of the domains.
But the ministers, those who have been in charge of the industry and that on the ground in Africa, they never put these stipulations on the Chinese. They just sign the paperwork and say, "Yep, let's do the deal." And they think they've done the deal, but you know, in the sense, the generations after them, they're just making them into. They're always going to be beholden to the other nations because they're not up to speed with what's happening.
Right. Right, and that's where the United States can play a very strong role in governance in these areas, and putting pressure on African governments to actually uphold, the Chinese and the South Koreans and the Japanese and what they're doing over there. Because not just the Chinese doing it, the Chinese are more pronounced because the numbers are a lot larger. But the Japanese and the South Koreans are doing the same exact thing. I think Russia could play a role in that as well as putting pressure on those governments and saying, hey, because for all intents and purposes, there is a governance and social gap between Chinese operations on the ground and the African governments itself. And it's not the people's fault. It's not the people's fault on the ground, and it's not the Chinese workers' fault, because the Chinese workers are being sent there against their own will too. They don't really have too much choice in that either. And so the labor, and that's a problem that I have with the African skill set, that they have to upskill themselves to actually be a part of that work.
That's true,
right? And so maybe your point you made earlier, man, Friday, was that coming from the West, that skill set can be actually transferred. Over there, the Western skill set can be actually transferred. That can play a role, but the problem in America in particular is that most Black people don't really work in the driving of the technology here. They only work in the services side. So you have people who can operate a train, but they don't actually know how to make the train.
That's true.
Right? So they're conductors, but they're not the actual chief engineers that are behind it.
100%, yep.
That's for me, that's where the problem starts to come in. And I think that
big problem.
I think that people will have to understand that if you're going to go to the continent, you got to be able to drive the technology forth. See, they would rather do business with African Americans because then they don't have to do business with the Chinese and have to be beholden to a lot of these sort of strategies. The only reason they do business with the Chinese because the Chinese are the only ones willing to do the business in the first place.
Yeah.
They don't have any, there's no other alternative.
Well, there was before there was the Europeans, but obviously that's a more exploitative relationship.
Yeah.
They're just guys on the block, and it's the continent now is they're calling it the last frontier, whatever, like for markets and stuff like that, and everybody wants a piece of it. Everybody wants to get in, and they're just trying to find different ways, to kind of like extrapolate what they want from what they see as a docile population and vast resources, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's we've talked about this many times on here the last couple of years. I think there's room and opportunity to actually form a diasporan consortium for business purposes with the continent. See, you can't go over there as an individual and try to force change like that. You got to go over there as a collective group, as a collective venture capitalist group, a collective technological committee, things of that nature, where you can actually interface with the governments from a collective standpoint. Too often, diasporans try to go over there as individuals and think that, well, give me citizenship, give me this, give me that. You're not going to get anything from these people.
Yeah, there is that, you know. The problem with people coming together and doing it, I think some people have tried this. I'm always hearing about these diasporan delegations from the Caribbean or from London or from, you know, everybody's trying to be these little delegations to go over there, but when they don't have the same perspective as the Africans on the ground. Is what you were talking about earlier on when somebody mentioned it in the chat, you know, talking about citizenship. They don't, it's not they don't see you, they don't respect you as a diasporan, it's that they don't identify with you in the same way we identify with them. They just don't have that concept. I think I speak for in the UK, but in some parts of the UK where there's not that many black people, they identify as you know, skin color. I see another black man, you say what's up to him, you're hailing up XYZ. Over there, everybody's black, so they don't see a black skin as a cultural identifier in the same way that we do as diasporians. Yeah, you know, we think, okay, I'm black, he's black, so we're gonna do this black thing. Their enemies are black as well. You know, they've got tribalism and stuff among them, so they don't see it. They just see another black man as another black. They don't feel no way about it. It doesn't mean anything to them. You know,
I think that happens at the lower scale, right? Your most common everyday people, but when it comes to tech, I think there is cohesion there.
Okay.
When I was at the African Tech Summit, there was cohesion there. There was a lot of business, you know, exchanges and stuff like that. You know, it was like 4 of us from the West, diasporans. We was in the room. We, we introduced ourselves, and a woman from the West said, "Hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if we formed this startup right now?" And that, that put a pause on everything and was like, "Hey, maybe this can work, right? Because we all have similar interests in the continent. We all looking for opportunity here. Why don't we try something?" And that's how that got started. Those sort of conversations were happening. So I think.
Sorry, did you say she was from the diaspora, or she was an African woman? She was
a Ghanaian, but she spent most of her life in the States, and so she came from the States to come to the event to see.
Right.
So she's looking at this and saying, all of this, intellectual prowess around here and brain power and human capital, why aren't we trying to put something together now? So I have her business card up. I hit her up already, and I haven't heard back from her. I know she was on the continent when I last spoke to her. She's supposed to be coming back. But point of the matter here is that I think there is now a better opportunity to do stuff. We can actually force some ideas on the table, even from a construction standpoint. There's still, like I said, there's a skills gap there with the Africans as well, because they don't know how to work a backhoe. They don't know how to work a jackhammer like that. They haven't been trained on a lot of these sort of things. Okay, maybe they could swing a hammer and bang a nail, but that's one thing. But what happens when you start getting to the more complex equipment?
My concern with that and the lady you're talking about is that a lot of people say that they're Pan-Africanist, but she's probably, from the diaspora, we consider ourselves Pan-Africanist lovers, but many of the people from Africa who call themselves Pan-Africanists are actually African nationalists, and they're there for their country. So whether it's Rwanda, when they're talking about uplifting Africa, they're talking about uplifting Rwanda,
right.
Or at least the 52 or how many countries it is in Africa. They don't think it's the Africans as we do, as like at the global perspective. They're not talking about Barbados. They're not talking about Trinidad. They're not talking about America. So you need to make a distinction between that, because when we go over there, we say to ourselves, yeah, we're gonna uplift the African nation or whatever, but it's two different concepts. You know, there's at least 3 different types of Pan-Africanisms floating around, and they don't, you know, they're all interchanging, all claiming to be the same thing, but they're actually not. You know, they all call themselves that, but they're interacting differently with different objectives. Like I said, some's dealing with the African states, some's dealing with their own particular African country. That's as diasporian talking about the global black family, you know, and we need to be careful with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the problem is that for us, we're looking for identity, you know, coming from the West, and for them, they're looking for opportunity, right? And so there's a, you know, there's a mixing match of people's priorities and needs. But I think some of that is slowly starting to change. So your common everyday person, yeah, they're a nationalist, but those who have traveled are coming back and saying, hey, this shit needs to change, right? So there needs to be some changes to all of this. It's once they travel, then they have a different perspective.
No, but Mike, those people, those are diasporians. Even though your friend is from Ghana, she's actually she's an American black. She's grown up in America. She's an American. They've got the same point of view as us.
Yeah, they have a,
you know, I've got African friends, and they all you know, like on the pro-black tip, but on the continent, you know, it's not. I don't know if it's the same. I don't know. I think they like being black or whatever, but when they're talking, because they've got like a, sorry to jump over the place, they've got like a Nkrumah, you know, Kwame Nkrumah. You heard of Nkrumah?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Kwame Nkrumah is, you know, like some consider him like the father of Pan-Africanism. And what he did was really, or one of the things I'm probably critical of him of, is what he did is take the Pan-African concept that was, as you spoke about earlier, which is a Western or diasporian concept, and he applied it to the African nation states without including the diasporians. And there's a whole lot of people who've grown up under that kind of like identity, as talking about Africa as a continental sense, you know, and they have a slightly different perspective when it comes to us outside of that. That's the same point I'm making again. You know?
Yeah, I think there's a cultural gap there, and I think, from my understanding, it's supposed to be building these sort of Pan-African institutions that bring, you know, both the West and the continent together on the same page. How long that's going to take, I don't know. I think that you can actually have that conversation, but somebody has to drive that conversation too. You know, somebody has to drive it. I mean, everybody's a cheerleader for their own country, but then most of these countries are all artificially made anyway. So I'm not sure what. Yeah, they're all franchises of colonialism. So.
Cool. I'm gonna jump off now because it's almost 5 o'clock in the UK.
Okay, bro.
So thanks for that, and I'll go jump back in the chat.
All right. Peace. All right, man. That was a dope discussion, man. I'm glad they all jumped on. It allowed us to engage in a different level. Yeah, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this any further. Please hit the like button if not already done so. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust and those posted on the community tab. Doc in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with. In reference to, just as an FYI, we are not certified financial planners. If you want a certified financial planner, go to cfp.net and look up one in your area.
They gotta stop lying to the kids, man. Feeding them that same old bullshit. You know what I mean? Regurgitated crap. It's the meaning behind the sacred symbols. The goal behind the patience that makes it simple. For me to be the creator, I had to stay consistent. Knew that it would be greater later and stay persistent. When your move's about millions, you gotta run a maze. So get the hint, no disturbances when I'm running plays. Needs and wants the strongest traits of the human nature. Disconnections from it all, some say it's elevation. But fuck that, we getting rich for my peoples who was crucified, tortured, and lynched. I'm a product of kings and queens and gods and earths and slaves anonymous. Death is what we used to shout. So why we still throwing parties inside a burning house? The devil's still trying to turn us out. History repeats what you refuse to learn about. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere. I probably move to Ghana, get into politics to restore the motherland and legalize marijuana. 1 for the ancestors, 2 for the rituals, the reincarnated energy from the spiritual crossroads that seems near me. My thoughts travel like string theory, which allows me to do my thing yearly. Unorthodox artist when I started was hella critics. I went from pimping and macking to using metaphysics. I'm on some Dr. Delbert Blair shit, dropping heavy. Science, word up, I even blew trees with Dr. Sebi. And that was around the same time I was copping heavy. Couple homies fell victim that was not respected. I'm still a factor in my section, studying lessons from the essence. The wisdom is the most precious. Sajad Allahu to the ones who know the hidden face that came from the west with new wine and golden scrolls. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere. Accept your own and do for self. This life is all about health and wealth. My 12 jewels keep me focusing, yeah. I'm on my square. Acknowledge God that's seen and heard everywhere.